Rick turning himself into a pickle just to avoid family therapy and nearly dying in a sewer. Rick creating giant sperm monsters that threatened to destroy America because he didn't bother checking what was actually in the barrel. Rick getting so blackout drunk he created death traps for superheroes and then couldn't remember doing it the next morning. And those are just 3 of the catastrophically stupid RDM in this video. Can you imagine all the mind-numbingly idiotic stuff there is to uncover when we dive deep into 2 hours of Rick's dumbest ever moments? I was certainly shocked by some of the stuff I found when I made this video, so if you're ready to be blown away by what's about to come, sit back, relax, maybe pour yourself some Szechuan sauce, and let's begin. In the very first episode, a heavily intoxicated Rick drags Morty out of bed at night, flies erratically through space while drunk, and reveals he's built a neutrino bomb to destroy Earth and start fresh with Morty and Jessica as the new Adam and Eve. Morty has to physically fight Rick for control of the ship to prevent planetary annihilation. The pilot episode, very on-the-nose title for a show about a drunk guy flying a spaceship, opens with Rick stumbling into Morty's bedroom in the middle of the night, absolutely hammered, spilling alcohol on Morty's bed. He's dragging Morty by the ankle, saying he's got a surprise. Morty's protesting, but Rick's not taking no for an answer. Very cool grandpa energy if your definition of cool includes kidnapping and property damage. They get in Rick's flying ship that he built out of stuff I found in the garage. Very reassuring origin story for the vehicle you're about to fly through the night sky while intoxicated. Rick's driving like he just left an Applebee's happy hour, asking Morty what he thinks of the ship. Then Rick drops the bomb literally and figuratively. I had to make a bomb, Morty. I had to create a bomb. A neutrino bomb specifically. He's planning to drop it on Earth, get a whole fresh start. The show's first episode, and we're already at extinction level events. Very start as you mean to go on storytelling. Rick wants to pick up Jessica from Morty's math class first. When he drops the bomb, he wants Morty to have somebody. He's gonna make it like a new Adam and Eve situation with Morty, as Adam and Jessica as Eve. Very romantic, I definitely thought this through while sober. Very much not how repopulation works. Morty's not having it. Jessica doesn't even know I exist. But forget about that, because you can't blow up humanity. Rick misinterprets this as Morty being worried. Rick's gonna try to hook up with Jessica, because apparently in Rick's drunk brain, that's the real issue here, not the genocide. Morty says he doesn't care about Jessica, he cares about not destroying the planet. Rick's response? You're right. Let's forget the girl altogether. Then he arms the neutrino bomb. The ship's robot voice calmly announces, arming neutrino bomb, like it's selecting a podcast. The show really said, Episode 1, let's do apocalypse, speedrun, any %. Morty unbuckles his seatbelt and attacks Rick, trying to grab the wheel. They're fighting, talking over each other, Rick asking, what's gotten into you? Like Morty's being unreasonable for not wanting Earth destroyed. Very am I the asshole? Energy from Rick here. Rick eventually agrees to land, big, tough guy all of a sudden, very sarcastic for someone who just got tackled by a teenager to prevent mass extinction. They crash land in a desert among dozens of empty alcohol cans and bottles that spill out when Rick opens the door. The visual really drives home that Rick's been drinking enough to fill a recycling center. Rick tumbles out and immediately tries to spin this as all a test to make Morty more assertive. Morty asks if it really was. Rick's response, sure, why not? I don't know. Then he falls asleep mid-sentence like he's practicing for a college dorm party. The robot voice reminds them the neutrino bomb is still armed. Very cool, very normal pilot episode stuff. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick got blackout drunk, built a bomb capable of destroying Earth, kidnapped his teenage grandson, and flew through the night sky planning genocide, all while so intoxicated he can't even explain his own motivations. It's like if Tony Stark built Ultron after a bender and then couldn't remember why. The amount of alcohol involved is staggering. When Rick opens the ship door, dozens of cans and bottles fall out like a liquor store inventory check. He's been drinking the entire time he was planning and executing this scheme. This was sustained, heavy drinking, throughout bomb building and Morty kidnapping. Rick's plan makes zero sense, even by drunk logic. Pick up Jessica, drop a bomb, create new humanity with 2 teenagers who've never spoken. There's no consideration for Jessica's consent, no thought about whether 2 people can actually repopulate a species, no plan for food or shelter. It's a drunk idea executed with the resources of a genius, which is basically giving a toddler the nuclear codes, but the toddler has a PhD. The "it was all a test" excuse is transparently garbage. Rick doesn't know if it was a test. He's making it up on the spot because he just woke up from passing out and doesn't remember his own reasoning. This is textbook blackout behavior, doing things while drunk, forgetting them, and reverse engineering explanations later like you're trying to explain a drunk text at brunch. Morty had to physically assault his grandfather to prevent planetary destruction. That's the bar we're setting in episode 1, when teenage intervention is the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. And Rick's response is to be sarcastic about Morty being a big tough guy, very emotionally mature, great conflict resolution skills. The bomb is still armed at the end of this sequence. Rick passed out without disarming it. If Morty hadn't fought him for the wheel and forced a landing, Rick might have just dozed off mid-flight and dropped a neutrino bomb on a populated area while unconscious. That's drunk negligence with apocalyptic consequences like falling asleep with a cigarette, but the cigarette is planetary extinction. This sets the tone for the entire series. Rick's genius enables his worst impulses, and alcohol removes whatever minimal judgment he has left. The show's literally opening with, here's your protagonist. He's brilliant, drunk, and willing to destroy Earth on a whim. Very meet-cute for a grandfather-grandson relationship that's definitely going to require therapy later. The fact that this is framed as a test Morty passes makes it worse. Rick's rewarding Morty for stopping him from committing genocide. That's outsourcing your moral compass to a 4-year-old, because you can't be trusted with your own decisions while drinking. The episode continues with Rick taking Morty on a normal adventure that involves breaking Morty's legs, smuggling seeds in his rectum, and killing security guards at interdimensional customs. But the opening sequence establishes that Rick's baseline is drunk enough to consider planetary extinction. Everything else is just degrees of terrible from there. And here's the kicker, nobody in the family knows about this. The next morning at breakfast, they're arguing about Rick's influence on Morty, but they don't know Rick literally almost nuked Earth hours earlier. Beth and Jerry think the worst Rick does is keep Morty out late. If they knew about the almost destroyed all human life thing, the nursing home conversation might have gone differently. The pilot establishes that Rick's drinking isn't quirky scientist behavior, it's a genuine hazard that nearly caused human extinction in the first 10 minutes of the show. And nobody learns anything from it because Rick passes out before consequences happen and Morty doesn't tell anyone. Very healthy family dynamic, definitely setting up a stable foundation for 100 years of adventures. The show knew exactly what it was doing, establishing that Rick's intelligence doesn't prevent catastrophically stupid decisions when alcohol's involved, and that Morty's gonna spend the next several seasons cleaning up after his grandfather's drunk mistakes. Welcome to the show, here's your emotional damage. If you thought that was crazy, let's move on to the next Rick's dumb moment. Rick Sanchez is supposed to be the smartest man in the universe. The guy can build interdimensional portals, create sentient robots, and turn himself into a pickle. But apparently, asking basic follow-up questions is where his genius hits a wall, because in one of the show's most catastrophic disasters, Rick's combination of overconfidence and carelessness literally destroyed an entire reality, and his solution was just to move to a different one, like he was switching apartments. This all goes down in Rick Potion #9, and honestly, the title should have been a warning sign. Morty's got a crush on Jessica and begs Rick to make him a love potion. Rick's like, whatever, extracts some chemical from a vole's brain, because apparently that's where the romance juice lives, mixes it with Morty's DNA, and hands it over like he's a sketchy pharmacy. Morty even asks if there are any side effects or dangers, and Rick, with the confidence of a man who's never faced consequences in his life, basically says, "What am I? A hack?" and tells him it's foolproof. Then, as Morty's walking out the door, Rick casually drops, "Unless she has the flu," like it's no big deal. You know, just a tiny detail that could potentially ruin everything. No worries though. At the school dance, Morty smears this potion on Jessica, and boom, she's instantly obsessed with him, like Fatal Attraction levels of obsessed. She's grabbing him, telling him she loves him so much it burns, making everyone around them deeply uncomfortable. Then she sneezes. And because Jessica had the flu, something Rick casually mentioned, after already giving Morty the serum, great timing there, genius. The love potion goes full pandemic mode. The infected particles spread through the air, like the world's worst perfume commercial. Everyone at the dance gets infected. Brad, the jock who was just bullying Morty, is now professing his love and grabbing Morty's butt. The principal and Mr. Goldenfold are discussing a three-way. Now the entire school wants to bang Morty, which sounds like a teenage fantasy until you realize it's actually a zombie apocalypse but hornier. The infection spreads faster than a Twitter controversy. Brad sneezes into the punch bowl. He sneezes into a vent. Within what seems like minutes, the entire town is infected. Then the entire country. Then the entire world. Everyone on Earth is now romantically and sexually obsessed with one 14-year-old kid. Yeah, this episode gets dark. Rick shows up, realizes he screwed up, and decides to fix it with another serum, this time using praying mantis DNA, because mantises are the opposite of voles. They mate once, then decapitate their partner. It's like Rick Googled animals that hate love and went with the first result. Rick's understanding of fixing relationships is truly something a therapist would have a field day with. He even admits the serum won't work on people genetically related to Morty, which is his way of saying, don't worry, I'm not trying to bang you in the middle of a global crisis. Priorities, right? Now everyone still wants Morty, but they also want to eat him alive afterward. It's like Tinder, but everyone's profile says, looking for dinner, and a date. People are literally rapping about wanting to wrap their arms around Morty and feel him inside them, then presumably consuming his corpse. The whole world is infected at this point, and things are getting worse by the second. Even Beth's coworker Davin gets infected at the horse hospital and turns into this mantis creature hybrid, asking about what Morty's skin smells like, which is nightmare fuel on multiple levels. Meanwhile, Jerry's having his own adventure thinking Beth is cheating on him with Davin. He shows up at the hospital, armed with a crowbar, finds Mantis Davin attacking Beth, and beats him to death while delivering the coldest line in the series. Gods turning people into insect monsters. Beth, I'm the one beating them to death. Thank me. For once in his life, Jerry's actually useful. Character development through apocalypse. You love to see it. So Rick tries again. This time he whips up a serum with koala, rattlesnake, chimpanzee, cactus, shark, golden retriever, and a bit of dinosaur DNA. His logic? Mix a bunch of random animals together, and it'll somehow equal normal humanity. It's like he's making a genetic smoothie without reading the recipe. Just throw everything in the blender and hope for the best. Morty's like, that doesn't make sense. How does that add up to normal humanity? And Rick basically tells him to shut up because credentials matter, Morty. Are you the scientist or are you the kid that wanted to get laid? Classic Rick, deflecting responsibility by reminding everyone he's smarter than them. They fly over the planet and release the serum. Rick's all confident, telling Morty to take a good look and soak it in before he pulls the lever. He's even stalling, saying there's no rush. They should just enjoy how crazy everything is. It's like he's proud of the chaos he's created. Then Morty pulls the lever, and instead of fixing anything, it turns every single person on Earth into grotesque flesh monsters. The entire human race is now mutated. Cronenberg creatures named after the director who makes body horror look like an art form. David Cronenberg would be proud, honestly. The show even brings him in later to voice a character, which is peak meta. Thanks for watching, and for next 4. People are morphing into these grotesque masses of flesh, eyes, tentacles, and organs. Jerry and Beth are fighting them off with machetes and shotguns, like they're in a zombie movie. Summer's at home quoting Jaws for some reason. The world has literally ended, and Rick's response is, sometimes science is more art than science, Morty. A lot of people don't get that. Yeah, no kidding, they don't get it, because it's a terrible excuse for destroying a planet. Rick's grand solution to this apocalyptic disaster he caused? Just abandon that reality. Find a dimension where they successfully fix the problem. Wait for those versions of themselves to die, then slip into their lives like the universe's worst identity thieves. They literally watch themselves die in an explosion, bury their own dead bodies in the backyard, and pretend nothing happened. It's Weekend at Bernie's meets Existential Crisis, meets the darkest possible ending to a sitcom episode. Rick even has the audacity to tell Morty, "You're welcome," because technically, if Rick hadn't screwed up as much as he did, they'd be the dead versions. So, in Rick's mind, his catastrophic incompetence actually saved them. That's some next-level mental gymnastics right there. Meanwhile, the original Smith family is left behind in a Cronenberg wasteland, forced to survive in a world Rick destroyed because he was too lazy to ask, "Hey, you feeling sick?" before handing Morty a potentially dangerous genetic serum. Beth even says she's finally happy now that Rick and Morty are gone, which is devastating. Rick turned an entire reality into a Walking Dead episode, except the monsters want to make out with you first, and his response was basically, "Not my problem anymore. Peace out." The episode even shows us there's a dimension where the Cronenberg transformation was the fix, where Rick and Morty turned a world full of Cronenbergs into normal humans, and that Rick and Morty have to abandon their world for the Cronenberg dimension. It's layers upon layers of Rick screwing up across infinite realities. The smartest man in the universe, ladies and gentlemen, can split atoms, can't remember to check if someone has the sniffles, can navigate infinite dimensions, can't be bothered to properly test a serum before releasing it into the world. This is why you don't let overconfident scientists make relationship advice drugs without an ethics board present. And just when you think it can't get dumber, moving on to the next Rick's dumb moment. Most parents struggle with work-life balance. Some hire babysitters, others rely on grandparents. Rick Sanchez, he built an entire pocket dimension to lock his daughter in so he wouldn't have to deal with her. And because this is Rick we're talking about, this safe, child-proof world eventually became a nightmare realm ruled by a cannibalistic incest king. Just normal grandpa stuff. This all happens in the ABCs of Beth, when the family's watching the news about a child murderer named Joseph Eli Lipnip getting executed. Beth casually mentions that the son he ate was her childhood best friend Tommy. Summer and Morty are like, yeah, we know. Stop bragging about your trauma. But Beth starts reminiscing about how she coped as a kid by convincing herself Tommy had just gotten lost in her imaginary world called Fruppyland. Rick overhears this and gets defensive. Turns out Fruppyland wasn't imaginary at all, Rick actually built it. And the name? Yeah, Rick's the one who named it Fruppyland, so when Beth starts calling it stupid, he gets weirdly offended about his creative choices. Classic Rick priorities, more concerned about his branding than the fact he used to lock his daughter in an alternate dimension. Beth realizes that if Fruppyland was real, Tommy might actually be in there. She's panicking because this means her best friend could have been trapped in a pocket dimension for decades, while she just went on with her life. Rick finds the device that opens the portal. He apparently just had it in a box in the garage this whole time, and they head inside to look for Tommy's sun-bleached skeleton. They enter Fruppyland, and Beth immediately calls it a glorified chicken coop, which Rick takes personally. He starts pointing out all the features procedurally generated clouds, a rainbow river, literally made of rainbow, all this effort he put into making it. Beth fires back with, well, you're supposed to put elbow grease into your daughter, which Rick responds to with, gross. Because apparently building an interdimensional babysitting prison is fine, but the idea of actual emotional labor is disgusting to him. Beth asks if something could have eaten Tommy, and Rick explains that Fruppyland creatures were specifically designed to be harmless, so Tommy definitely just starved to death. Super comforting, Rick. Thanks for that. Then Beth starts connecting the dots. She could have been the one who starved to death. What if she'd gotten hurt in there? Rick's response? Performative guilt. He immediately throws himself off a cliff, yelling about how he's a terrible dad and there's nothing to live for. Except the ground is bouncy, so he just harmlessly bounces back up. Then he tries to drown himself in the Rainbow River, but the water's breathable. Every suicide attempt fails because Rick designed Fruppyland to be completely childproof. He's literally being defeated by his own safety features while trying to avoid accountability. Rick's complaining about how he doesn't get credit for his parenting innovations, comparing himself to dads who get Reddit fame for making an R2D2 toilet, while he gave Beth her own world instead of an iPad and gets treated like Charles Manson. Then a giant grotesque bird with actual razor-sharp claws attacks Rick, sinking its talons into his arm and flying away with him while he screams in pain. Beth thinks Rick's still being dramatic to prove a point. But no, this thing is legitimately hurting him. The bird drops Rick into its nest, where 3 equally horrifying bird chicks start pecking at him. Rick shoots 2 of them with a ray gun, but the third one bites his entire arm off. He falls out of the nest, bouncing on the ground again, and has to use some device to create a robotic replacement arm while screaming in agony. Beth walks over and sarcastically says, "Oh yeah, this place is the safest, best dad ever," asking if Rick can just admit he screwed up. Rick's like, what would be the point of that? And when Beth pushes him to apologize, he says, "I'm sorry you think you deserve an apology." The man literally cannot admit fault even when his arm just got bitten off by a creature that shouldn't exist in his safe world. The bird attacks again. Rick's robot arm zaps it and causes it to explode. The arm analyzes the bird's DNA and reveals the problem. Fruppyland's procedurally generated DNA got mixed with real human DNA. Beth immediately puts it together. Tommy survived by having sex with Fruppyland creatures, creating human hybrid offspring, then eating them in an endless cycle of cannibalistic incest to sustain himself with protein. Rick says it's just a working theory, but if that's the case, Tommy would probably be worshipped as a god by a medieval society made up of his least delicious children. Right on cue, An army of Fruppyland hybrid creatures surrounds them with spears, calling Tommy their exalted ruler, giver and taker of life, humper and consumer of mortality. Rick and Beth are just like, yeah, we figured, take us to King Tommy. So let's recap Rick's genius parenting solution. Instead of hiring a babysitter or spending time with his daughter, he built a pocket dimension and locked her inside whenever he didn't want to deal with her. He designed it to be completely safe and harmless, but he didn't account for what would happen if someone got permanently stuck in there. Tommy had to resort to interspecies reproduction and cannibalism to survive, creating an entire civilization of his own incest hybrid children who worship him as a god king. Beth could have been that person. If Rick had forgotten about her just one time, which, let's be honest, is extremely plausible given Rick's track record, she would have been trapped in there, forced to either starve to death or become a cannibal sex deity ruling over her own mutant offspring. That's the childcare solution Rick was proud of. That's what he thought deserved Reddit praise. The episode later reveals that Beth did some messed up stuff as a kid that Rick had to cover up, including possibly being responsible for Tommy ending up in Fruppyland in the first place. But that doesn't change the fundamental stupidity of Rick's approach. His solution to, my daughter might be dangerous and I don't know how to parent her, was, let me build a prison dimension I can throw her in whenever she's inconvenient. Rick would rather collapse a quantum tesseract and create an entire pocket universe than have a single uncomfortable conversation with his daughter. He put more effort into procedurally generating clouds and making rainbow rivers than into actual parenting. And when his lazy, emotionally avoidant solution inevitably backfired and created a cannibalistic nightmare kingdom, his response was to try killing himself via bouncy ground and breathable water, rather than just say, yeah, I messed up. The smartest man in the universe, everyone, can build pocket dimensions, can't grasp the concept of spending quality time with your kid without imprisoning them in a fantasy realm that turns into Lord of the Flies meets an incest documentary. Think that was wild? Wait till you see the next Rick's dumb moment, but before that, subscribe to our channel. Rick needed to age some wine really fast for his nemesis Mr. Nimbus, so what does he do? He creates a dimension where time moves way faster than normal, you know, like Narnia. Except Rick somehow didn't think about what happens when you have a place where centuries pass in minutes. He sends Morty in there to grab the wine. Simple job, right? Just walk in, grab a bottle, walk out. But every time Morty goes through that portal, hundreds of years pass inside. And humans being humans, they start building civilizations. The first time Morty goes in, he meets this nice guy named Hoovy, who helps him carry wine. Seems friendly enough. Morty even takes an extra bottle as a gift because Hoovy's being helpful. Sweet moment. Then Morty leaves, and boom, decades pass. When he comes back, Hoovy's suddenly an old jacked warrior who's been waiting his entire life for Morty's return, screaming about avenging his family. Morty accidentally kills him in self-defense, which is traumatic enough. But wait, there's more. Turns out Hoovy had a wife, and a son named Japheth, and that son has spent his whole life training to kill the Dark Child, who abandoned his father. So now Morty's got this buff teenager trying to murder him because from their perspective, Morty's this mythical figure who ruined their family. It's like if you went to grab milk from the store and came back to find your neighbor's great-great-grandson trying to stab you for a grudge you didn't know existed. But it gets worse, because Morty keeps having to go back in for more wine. Thanks for the clear instructions, Rick. Entire generations start building religions around him. They call him the Traveler. They have prophecies. They train warriors specifically to fight him. There's this whole character named Adam, who gets raised by his mother to be the chosen one, who will pass through the door and end their suffering. They're doing training montages, building temples, writing scripture, all centered around this 14-year-old kid who just wants to impress a girl. The training scenes are brutal too. Adam's mother is literally beating him with sticks, making him fight over and over, asking him, "Do you think he will show you mercy like he did to us?" She's preparing her son for war against a god who doesn't even know he's a god. The whole society is structured around the trauma Morty accidentally inflicted just by existing in their timeline. At one point, there's literally a scene where old people are telling their kids, the boy is not coming back, and the kids are like, "You've wasted our lives on a fantasy." People are having generational arguments about whether Morty even exists. Fathers are calling their sons foolish for believing. Sons are calling their fathers cowards for giving up faith. One guy says, those called fools are the only ones brave enough to see the truth, right before Morty shows up and proves he was right all along. Some dude spends his entire life building a temple based on what he thought was a lie, only to see Morty show up right before he dies. His last words are basically, "Oh, he's real. I was wrong. God is re." And then Morty accidentally kills him too. The comedy timing on that death is dark as hell, by the way. The civilization gets so advanced that by the time Morty makes his final trip, they've developed complex philosophy and technology. They've got this whole cult leader named Adam who's been trapped in there for what seems like eternity. This guy tells Morty he's glimpsed into the mind of eternity, perhaps the mind of God, and found nothing but silence. He's having full-on existential crises about the meaning of life and whether he's just an object in someone else's story. Which, to be fair, he literally is. He's a side character in Morty's wine-fetching subplot. Adam goes on this whole monologue about how he had nothing but time, and it drove him to madness, then enlightenment, then madness again. He watched the life of time in all its fleeting, terrible light, and still couldn't figure out if he'd actually lived, or if he was just a prop in someone else's narrative. This is the level of psychological damage Rick's wine-aging shortcut caused. People are questioning the nature of existence itself, because Rick couldn't wait a few decades for his alcohol to ferment properly. The whole dimension becomes this nightmare, where Morty's worshipped as a deity, feared as a demon, and responsible for countless deaths across multiple generations. Wars are fought in his name. Families are destroyed. Entire philosophical movements rise and fall. Mothers train their children for a war that only happens because Morty keeps needing to grab bottles. The people in there develop their own concept of fate, destiny, and divine purpose, all accidentally created by a nervous teenager who was just trying to help his grandpa impress a fish man. And Rick's response to all this? Nothing. He doesn't even acknowledge it. Morty comes back traumatized, covered in whatever the aftermath of creating and destroying civilizations looks like, and Rick's just annoyed the wine situation took so long. There's no, "Hey, sorry about the psychological damage and the blood of thousands on your hands. Just, where's my wine, Morty?" Rick literally watches Morty stumble out of the portal, looking shell-shocked, and his only concern is whether the bottles are properly aged. Even when Morty tries to explain what happened, Rick cuts him off. There's this moment where Morty's clearly distressed, trying to process the fact that he's become an accidental god king responsible for genocides, and Rick's already moving on to the next problem. It's like telling your boss about your traumatic car accident, and they respond with, "Cool, but did you finish the spreadsheet?" The smartest man in the universe, everyone, can build a pocket dimension with accelerated time. Can't be bothered to consider what happens when you drop a modern human into a medieval time loop and make him everyone's god king by accident. It's like Rick watched The Lion, The Witch, and The Wardrobe and thought, yeah, but what if we made it way more traumatic, and also it's Morty's fault? The whole thing was avoidable. Rick could have just bought expensive wine. He could have used literally any other aging method. He could have told Mr. Nimbus, sorry, fresh out of the good stuff. But no, Rick had to show off with his Narnia dimension, and now Morty's got religious trauma, survivor's guilt, and probably needs therapy for accidentally becoming a genocidal deity. Also, Rick could serve proper wine at a dinner party with a guy who controls the police and wants to have a threesome with Beth and Jerry. Yeah, that's a whole other thing happening in this episode, but at least nobody built a civilization around it. The episode treats this whole catastrophe as a minor inconvenience. By the end, Jessica's still waiting for Morty. Rick's making peace with Mr. Nimbus. And nobody's talking about the fact that Morty just caused the rise and fall of an entire civilization in the span of one evening. It's treated with the same weight as forgetting to pick up groceries. That's the Rick and Morty universe for you, where destroying countless lives across multiple generations is just another Tuesday night chore. If that blew your mind, the next Rick's dumb moment will break it. For someone who claims nothing matters and emotions are for suckers, Rick has a funny way of proving himself wrong. The guy can handle interdimensional wars, alien invasions, and galaxy-ending threats without breaking a sweat. But a breakup? That apparently calls for building a suicide machine in the garage. In Autoerotic Assimilation, Rick runs into his ex-girlfriend Unity while answering a distress beacon. Except Unity isn't exactly a person, she's a hive mind that assimilates entire planets. When they dated, Unity was just a small-town consciousness. Now she's a whole planet. And Rick's thrilled to reconnect. They immediately fall back into old patterns. Rick asks Unity to create elaborate sex scenarios involving hang gliders, crotchless Uncle Sam costumes, stadiums full of naked redheads, and crowds of men who look like Rick's father. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but we're moving on. Unity obliges, because apparently when you're a hive mind controlling billions of bodies, Your ex-boyfriend's weird requests are just another Tuesday. The partying escalates fast. Rick and Unity start making drugs together, using powdered neutronium and other substances that shouldn't be mixed. They blow up an entire town for fun, though Unity evacuated it first, so it's cool, right? They create a TV show just so Rick can watch it, cancel it, and put it back on. Unity starts losing control of the planet. People are vomiting in the streets. Vehicles are crashing. The assimilated are literally falling apart because Unity's too drunk to maintain control. Summer and Morty try to intervene. Summer points out that Rick and Unity are terrible for each other like leggings and mid-calf boots, she says. They bring out the worst in each other. Morty agrees, telling Rick this whole situation is unhealthy, but Rick dismisses them completely. He calls Summer a hyper-emotional, needy little human and says he can tolerate it but doesn't give a crap about it. He tells them to take a hike, so they leave. And Rick keeps partying. He's sitting on a couch surrounded by assimilated bodies, making them perform for him like puppets, completely confident that everything's great. He even gives Unity this whole speech about how Summer and Morty are just aimless chumps who put powerful people at the center of their lives and then want them to be less powerful. Unity agrees. Never gonna change, right? Then Rick goes to the bathroom. When he comes back, Unity's gone. Completely gone. The entire planet has been de-assimilated. Every single body Unity controlled is now back to being their own person. And there are letters everywhere. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every surface covered in the same breakup note. Rick walks through the town reading them. Unity explains that she's attracted to Rick for the same reason she can't be with him. He can't change. She knows she'll never be complete. Just keep assimilating species after species. But with Rick, she loses herself and becomes part of him. Because Rick's somehow better at what Unity does without even trying, so she's leaving. The note ends with, yours, and nobody else's, Unity, followed by a postscript warning Rick to get checked for diseases from the coal miners she assimilated. Rick comes home. Beth confronts him about the alien prisoner in the underground lair, whole other subplot, and Rick just quietly agrees to her rules. Summer asks what happened with Unity. Rick pretends he doesn't care, says Unity thrives on enslavement, and who needs that anyway? Then he goes to the garage. This is where it gets dark. Really dark. The song Do You Feel It by Chaos. Chaos starts playing. Rick drains his flask and throws it away. He pulls out some equipment and starts building something on his desk. He takes a frozen alien creature from storage, brings it back to life with chemicals, and while this helpless thing is shrieking, he strokes it almost tenderly. Then he drinks the rest of the chemicals himself. He puts the creature under this device. He's built a disintegration ray that vaporizes the alien instantly. No dramatic explosion, just gone, erased from existence. Then Rick sits down, positions his own head under the device, and activates it. The laser powers up. Rick's sitting there waiting to die. At the last possible second, he passes out drunk, and his head falls to the side, missing the killing blast by inches. The laser fires into empty space. Rick's unconscious, slumped over his desk, completely unaware he just barely survived his own suicide attempt. The camera zooms out through the open garage door. Rick stays there all night. The sun comes up, morning arrives. Jerry's outside, happily gardening, weeding the driveway, completely oblivious to the fact that Rick almost killed himself 10 feet away. Nobody knows. Nobody checks on him. Rick just stays passed out on that desk while the world keeps spinning. The episode doesn't treat this like a joke either. There's no punchline after, no comedic reveal, just Rick, alone, having almost killed himself, and nobody noticing. The post-credits scene shows him harassing Unity at Beta 7's ship, drunk and desperate, demanding to talk to her while Morty sits there uncomfortable. Rick can't let it go. He's obsessed. He tells Beta 7 that Unity will suck you in and use you up, and in a month he'll be making out with all of you in a bunch of red wigs. He's spiraling. For a guy who constantly talks about how nothing matters and he doesn't care about anything, Rick sure can't handle rejection. The second someone he actually cares about leaves him, he immediately jumps to ending his own life. No middle ground. No, maybe I'll feel better in a few days. Just 0 to suicide in one evening. And the worst part? Nobody knows it happened. Beth thinks he's just being quiet. Summer thinks he's fine. The family has no idea they almost lost him. Rick wakes up the next day and goes back to pretending nothing matters, nothing affects him, he's above it all. But we saw what happened when someone cracked through that armor. We saw him alone in that garage, drunk and broken, testing his death machine before using it on himself. And believe it or not, it actually gets worse. Moving on to the next Rick's dumb moment, and if you're enjoying this video so far, subscribe to our channel. Most people fake being sick to get out of stuff they don't want to do. Maybe call in with a stomach bug, pretend you have a headache, the usual. Rick decided the appropriate level of effort to avoid 1 hour of family therapy was to transform himself into a literal pickle and nearly die multiple times in a sewer. In Pickle Rick, the family has a therapy appointment scheduled that everyone agreed to a week ago, including Rick. When Morty goes to get him, he finds Rick on his workbench, transformed into a pickle. Rick acts like this is just some fun experiment he's doing to challenge himself, completely unrelated to the therapy session. Total coincidence that he became a pickle on therapy day. Morty's not buying it. He immediately spots a syringe filled with mysterious liquid hanging directly above Rick, attached to a timer set to go off in exactly 10 minutes, the exact moment they would have left for therapy. The contraption includes scissors that would cut the string and drop the serum onto Rick, turning him back into a human. Rick tries to claim the syringe is completely unrelated to this discussion and doesn't warrant further explanation. Real smooth, Rick. Beth sees through it too. She cuts down the syringe and takes it with her, asking Rick if he really wants to get pierced by a needle full of liquid unrelated to his situation. Rick can't argue with that logic without admitting what the serum actually does. So the family leaves for therapy, and Rick's stuck on the workbench as a pickle with no way to turn himself back. Things go downhill fast. The neighbor's cat wanders in, sees Pickle Rick, and freaks out because cats think pickles are snakes. The cat bats Rick off the workbench, and he rolls down the driveway into the street. The sun starts beating down on him, and he begins to shrivel up, literally dying of dehydration. He's convinced this is how he's going to die, the mega-genius equivalent of dying on the toilet. Then it starts raining. Hard. Rick's relieved for about 2 seconds before the street starts flooding, and he gets washed into a sewer grate, falling into the sewers below. He's now in a dark sewer, surrounded by cockroaches and rats, with zero way to move or defend himself. So Rick does what Rick does. He uses science to survive in the most violent way possible. He bites his lip to release pickle juice, which attracts a cockroach. When it gets close enough, Rick bites its head, exposes its brain, and licks specific parts of it to control its legs like a remote control. He's literally steering a dead bug's body by licking its brain to move himself around. A rat shows up and attacks him. Rick sets up this elaborate Rube Goldberg trap using bug parts, a razor blade, rubber bands, and a broken bottle. The trap works, kills the rat, and Rick builds this whole automated machine that rips apart the rat's body and attaches its limbs to his pickle body. He connects the rat brain to the limbs with a needle, and boom, he's now a pickle with functional rat arms and legs. More rats show up. Rick fights them off using makeshift weapons he builds from office supplies and rat parts. He's got wrist-mounted screwdrivers shooting screws, X-Acto blades popping out, the whole deal. He slaughters his way through dozens of rats until he's standing on a pile of rodent corpses, wearing a full rat exoskeleton. Rick climbs out of the sewer through a toilet and emerges in some kind of foreign agency building. He immediately gets spotted by armed guards who start shooting at him. Turns out, he accidentally infiltrated a heavily secured government facility. The guards are calling him Solenia, an old wives' tale about a pickle man who steals children's dreams. Rick's response? Kill everyone. He builds weapons from office supplies, lasers, explosive devices, elaborate death traps. He takes out agent after agent, leaving a trail of bodies throughout the building. The agency director releases their top prisoner, a guy named Jaguar, to kill Rick. Jaguar's daughter is supposedly being held hostage, so he has to fight Rick to earn her freedom. Rick and Jaguar have this intense battle where both of them are treating their wounds in brutal ways. Rick's using tomato slices, mustard, and pickle slices to patch himself up. Jaguar's pouring gunpowder into his wound and lighting it on fire to cauterize it. Eventually, Rick wins, but lets Jaguar live. They team up, steal a helicopter, and blow up the entire facility. Rick finally shows up at Dr. Wong's therapy office. He kicks open the door and flops onto the couch next to Summer, covered head to toe in rat blood, sewage, and various bodily fluids. He asks Beth if she still has that syringe, and she, following Dr. Wong's advice, asks him to tell her what's in it first. Rick admits it's anti-pickle serum. Dr. Wong asks why he lied to his daughter. Rick says it's because he doesn't respect therapy, because he's a scientist who invents and destroys for a living. When he doesn't like something about the world, he changes it. He doesn't think listening to some agent of averageness explain which words mean which feelings has ever helped anyone do anything. Dr. Wong absolutely destroys him with her response. She explains that the only connection between Rick's intelligence and his family's dysfunction is that everyone uses intelligence to justify their sickness. Rick alternates between viewing his mind as an unstoppable force and an inescapable curse, because the only concept he can't grasp is that his mind is within his control. He chose to become a pickle. He chose to talk and belittle her profession. And now he's sitting there dripping with rat blood and feces because his enormous mind is literally vegetating by his own hand. She tells him that repairing and maintaining isn't an adventure. There's no way to do it so wrong you might die. It's just work. And some people are okay going to work, while some people would rather die. Each person gets to choose. After therapy, Rick injects the serum and transforms back into a human, coughing up pickle brine. He immediately starts trash-talking therapists with Beth, suggesting they go get drinks instead of processing anything they just heard. Morty quietly says he liked Dr. Wong. Rick and Beth completely ignore him and start planning which bar to hit. If you thought Rick peaked there, think again onto the next dumb moment. When your teenage grandson asks for a souvenir from an alien pawn shop, most grandparents would suggest a keychain or maybe a weird space crystal. Rick decided the appropriate gift was a sex robot from an advanced alien civilization. No questions asked, no safety checks, just, here you go kid, enjoy your alien sex toy. In Raising Gazorpazorp, Rick and Morty are at an alien pawn shop in another dimension. Rick's haggling over some broken equipment when Morty spots a robot he thinks looks cool. He wants a souvenir, something to remember all their adventures by. He even gets a little emotional about it, asking what would happen if Rick died. Wouldn't it be nice to have something to remember him by? Rick's response? He turns to the alien shopkeeper and says, okay, 60 for the resonator, and my grandson wants the sex robot. Just like that. No, hey Morty, you sure about this? No, maybe let's think about what this robot actually does. Just immediate purchase of alien sex technology for his 14-year-old grandson. They bring it home. The family's sitting in the living room when they hear rhythmic creaking coming from upstairs. Jerry wants to intervene, but Beth talks him out of it, saying Morty's just going through puberty and they should be proud of him. Summer makes a comment about setting the bar low. So far, just standard, awkward family dynamics. Then Morty comes running downstairs in a panic, asking Rick to come help. The sex robot, who Morty named Gwendolyn, started beeping, transformed, and tried to fly away. Rick grabs it and realizes what's happening. This isn't just a sex robot, it's a genetic compiler with an incubation chamber. It's a baby-making machine, and it just made a baby that's half Morty, half Gazorpazorpian. Rick's reaction? It's my bad, guys. I'll take care of it. Then he pulls out a laser gun and tries to kill the baby immediately. The whole family freaks out and stops him. Rick explains that this thing could grow to the size of Delaware, might eat brains, might exhale space aids. They need to be careful, but Morty's already decided he's keeping it. He's a father now. He needs to be responsible. And he names it Morty Jr. Rick warns them not to let the baby out of their sight because it looks harmless now but could grow into something dangerous. Jerry makes a joke about the insane clown posse. Rick tells him 2003 called and wants its easy target back. Classic Rick deflection, make a joke instead of taking responsibility for the fact that he just created a potentially world-ending problem because he didn't bother to scan the robot before buying it. The family tries to help Morty parent this thing, but they're terrible at it. Beth and Jerry start fighting about parenting techniques, arguing about whether letting babies cry themselves out leads to stripping for attention. They're projecting their own parenting failures onto Morty's situation, which doesn't help anyone. Morty ends up taking the baby and declaring he'll raise Morty Jr. himself, because both his parents are nuts. Morty Jr. grows insanely fast. Within hours, he's a toddler. Within a day, he's speaking. Except his first words aren't dada, they're death, damnation, destruction, and domination. The kid is obsessed with violence from the moment he can talk. He's drawing pictures of murder. He's talking about conquering the planet. He's breathing fire when he gets upset. Morty tries everything to redirect this behavior. He suggests dancing, teaching Morty Jr. this cute song about handy hands. He suggests guitar. He even suggests masturbation as a healthy outlet. Nothing works. Morty Jr. just wants to dominate and destroy. He has zero interest in normal teenage activities. He wants to conquer planets and murder everyone he sees. Things escalate when Morty catches him smoking, and they get into a fight. Morty's trying to ground him, take away his History Channel privileges, limit him to cartoons and video games. Morty Jr. screams that he hates video games, which Morty takes as a personal attack. The argument gets physical. Morty accidentally pushes his son, and Morty Jr. realizes his dad lied to him. The air outside isn't actually poisonous. So he runs away, screaming about how his life has been a lie, God is dead, the government's lame, and Thanksgiving is about killing Indians. Morty panics and gets Jerry to help him. Jerry takes a long, dramatic sip from a very tall glass of I told you so before agreeing to help. They drive through the city, looking for Morty Jr., who's now fully grown and towering over buildings. He's picking up cars, smashing through structures, causing absolute chaos. People are screaming and running everywhere. Morty Jr. goes on a rampage through the city. He's picking up cars, smashing everything in sight. Rick shows up with a gun ready to kill him, but Morty stops him, saying if Rick hurts his son, he'll have to kill Morty too. Morty Jr. is confused and angry, roaring that he doesn't understand what's happening. Morty finally has an honest conversation with him, admitting that he ended up lying and yelling just like his own parents did. He explains that parents are just kids having kids, and everyone has bad impulses that need to be channeled into something constructive. Then Brad Anderson, creator of the comic strip Marmaduke, shows up. Yes, really, he tells Morty Jr. that he's haunted by thoughts of mutilation and sexual assault on a near-daily basis, but he channels it all into his work. When Morty says he never got that impression from reading Marmaduke, Brad Anderson responds, well, did you get the impression I was trying to make you laugh? Dark stuff. But it gives Morty Jr. an idea. Maybe he can be a creative and channel his violent thoughts into art. Morty Jr. decides to become a writer. He moves out, promising to call every day or whenever he needs money or a place to do laundry. He eventually writes a best-selling novel called My Horrible Father, about being locked in a house with violence and threats of poison gas. Jerry asks if the novel's profits will pay for his rear axle that got destroyed in the rampage. Nobody answers him. Meanwhile, Rick and Summer had their own adventure on Gazorpazorp, where they discovered the whole sex robot situation. The female Gazorpazorpians created these mechanical surrogates to reproduce without males. Because male Gazorpazorpians are so violent, they bombed their own civilization back to the Stone Age. The males get to play outside, while the females built a paradise. When a male is born, he becomes a full-grown adult within a day, and immediately becomes one of the most aggressively violent creatures in the universe. So, Rick knowingly gave Morty a reproduction device from a species famous for being uncontrollably violent. He saw a robot at a pawn shop, was told it was for sex, and bought it for his teenage grandson without asking a single follow-up question. Didn't scan it, didn't check its origins, didn't consider what sex robot from advanced alien civilization might actually mean in practice. The episode ends with Morty Jr. on TV, promoting his book about his horrible father who locked him in a house and threatened him with poison gas. Morty's watching, hoping his son is eating enough, while Beth tries to reassure him that he did the best he could. It's a thankless job being a parent, especially when your grandfather buys you alien technology that creates violent offspring within 24 hours. Rick's takeaway from all this? He tells Summer that after everything they just did, nothing really mattered, and there was no point to it. Kinda makes you wonder about nothing, he says. When Summer asks if this experience makes him reconsider his policy about taking girls on adventures, Rick says no. Any epiphanies about gender politics were just projections of her feminine insecurity. Then he gives her a pink spaceship to shut her up. That was just the warm-up, moving on to the next Rick's dumb moment. Most people have moral lines they won't cross for entertainment. Maybe you wouldn't shoplift for concert tickets or commit fraud for a vacation. Rick's line? Apparently, it's fine to arm professional killers, as long as the payout covers a few hours at a space arcade. In Morty Night Run, Rick's teaching Morty to fly the spaceship while Jerry tags along. They head to meet one of Rick's clients for what Rick calls business stuff. Morty asks what kind of business happens in a parking garage, pointing out it seems shady. Rick goes on this whole rant about how nothing shady ever happened in a fancy office, bringing up Wall Street guys, dipping their balls in cocaine, and wiping them on each other. His logic is that doing business in public means he's not shady. Then Krombopulos Michael shows up. He's this cheerful alien assassin who knocks on Rick's window like they're old friends. He hands Rick 3,000 flurbos and asks if Rick has the weapon. Rick tries to be discreet because Morty's right there, but Krombopulos Michael has zero sense of boundaries. He introduces himself to Morty, cheerfully announcing, "I'm an assassin. I buy guns from your grandpa." Rick passes him a case with an antimatter gun inside. Krombopulos Michael examines it, all excited about how deadly it looks, explaining that his target can't be killed with regular matter. Then he gives Morty his business card, telling him if he ever needs anybody murdered to give him a call. Rick's annoyed about the card, but Chrombopoulos Michael just keeps going, proudly declaring he has no code of ethics and will kill anyone, anywhere, children, animals, old people, doesn't matter. He just loves killing. After he leaves, Morty's understandably disturbed. He asks Rick if he's really selling weapons to killers for money. Rick calls Morty's mindset very planetary and says things are more complicated in space. He holds up the flurbos and asks if Morty understands what 2 humans can accomplish with 3,000 of these. Morty asks what? Rick's answer? An entire afternoon at Blips and Chits, which is basically an intergalactic Chuck E. Cheese arcade. That's it. That's the grand plan. Rick sold a weapon specifically designed to kill someone who can't be killed by normal means, to a guy who openly brags about murdering children and animals, so he could play video games for a few hours. Morty calls him out immediately, saying Rick sold a gun to a murderer just to play video games. Rick's response is classic deflection. He says, if you spend all day shuffling words around, you can make anything sound bad. Then he straps a VR helmet on Morty's head to distract him, which launches Morty into a game called Roy, where you live an entire human life. At Blips and Chits, Morty keeps pushing back. He says selling a gun to a hitman is the same as pulling the trigger. Rick argues it's also the same as doing nothing if Chrombopoulos Michael wants someone dead. Nobody can stop him anyway, so why not profit from it? It's the galaxy's worst version of, if I don't do it, someone else will. Morty refuses to let it go. He points out that Rick could stop the killing from happening, that Rick did a bad thing but could undo it. Rick's sitting down to play Roy at this point and says, that's the difference between you and me, Morty. I never go back to the carpet store, which is a reference to the game, but also his way of saying he never looks back, or second guesses his decisions. Morty ends up taking matters into his own hands. He looks at Chrombopoulos Michael's business card, which shows his location, and goes to stop the assassination himself. He crashes Rick's ship through the ceiling of a government facility, accidentally crushing Chrombopoulos Michael to death. This kicks off a whole adventure where Morty saves the target, a telepathic gaseous being named Fart, and they spend the episode trying to get Fart home. The episode ends with a dark twist. Fart reveals that his species views all carbon-based life as a disease that needs to be cured. Once he gets home, he'll bring back his people to cleanse Earth and wipe out humanity. Morty ends up shooting Fart with the antimatter gun to save his planet, learning the hard way that sometimes the right choice isn't so clear. But here's the thing, Rick was totally fine with the original assassination. He knew Chrombopoulos Michael was going to kill someone. He knew this person was dangerous enough that they were locked up in a maximum security facility and required antimatter to kill. He just didn't care. 3,000 flurbos for an afternoon of arcade games was worth whatever consequences came from arming a professional killer. Throughout the episode, Rick keeps throwing Morty's choices back in his face, pointing out that all the death and destruction happening during their chase is because of Morty's decision to save Fart. But Rick conveniently ignores that the whole situation started because he was willing to facilitate murder for beer money and video games. The episode also shows us the Jerrybury, a daycare for Jerrys from across dimensions where Rick dropped off Jerry at the start. Rick even checked boxes on a form listing reasons for the drop-off: stowaway and annoying me. He literally has a system for dumping family members when they're inconvenient, which tracks with his willingness to arm assassins for pocket change. By the end, they pick up the wrong Jerry from the daycare because Morty lost the ticket. Both Ricks just shrug it off with whatever and take each other's Jerrys home. Rick's so detached from consequences that even mixing up his son-in-law with an alternate dimension version doesn't matter to him. Rick's philosophy throughout the episode is basically nothing matters, so I might as well profit. He arms killers because he needs flurbos. He needs flurbos because he wants to play video games. The actual murder, the person who'll die, that's not his problem. He's just the middleman. Someone else pulling the trigger means he can pretend his hands are clean. Oh, we're just getting started. Here comes the next Rick's dumb moment, and if you want more videos like these, subscribe to our channel. Rick constantly reminds everyone he's the smartest person in the universe. So when a group of aliens literally described as the galaxy's most ambitious, least successful con artists managed to trick him multiple times in one day, it's pretty embarrassing. We're talking about con artists so bad at their jobs that they're famous across the galaxy for failing. In M. Night Shaym-Aliens, Rick's in his garage dissecting a rat when Morty comes in, talking about how beautiful the day is. Rick immediately starts mocking him, acting like Morty's performance is fake and the CPU is going to burn out. Morty has no idea what Rick's talking about. Beth walks by acting robotic, saying, "I am going to work. Goodbye." Rick keeps making comments about how sophisticated and responsive everything is. Morty thinks Rick's the one acting weird. He leaves for school and walks directly into the side of the garage door. At school, Mr. Goldenfold asks what 5 times 9 is, and Morty guesses, at least 40. Everyone gasps like this is the correct answer. Mr. Goldenfold declares Morty the best student and tells him to be the teacher. Jessica cheers for him. A student asks Morty to teach them how to make concentrated dark matter. Rick's been spying from outside. He realizes the Zagarians are trying to get his formula for concentrated dark matter, a special fuel he invented for faster space travel. Jessica tells Morty if he shares the formula, she'll be his girlfriend. Morty's about to cave when Rick kicks down the door, grabs him, and drags him to the locker room. Rick strips down and tells Morty to get in the shower with him. Morty's confused and horrified, but Rick explains they're inside a giant simulation on an alien spaceship. The whole world is fake. He couldn't say anything until they got in the shower because the Zagarians won't monitor them there. They're really uncomfortable with nudity. The Zagarians are watching from their control room, groaning and looking away in disgust at the naked humans on their screens. They're called the Zagarian Scammers, the galaxy's most ambitious, least successful con artists. Their whole plan relies on tricking Rick into revealing his secrets, but they can't handle watching 2 naked people in a shower. Rick and Morty run naked through the streets, while Rick points out all the sloppy details in the simulation. A guy putting a bun between 2 hot dogs. An old lady walking a cat on a leash. A Pop-Tart walking out of a toaster house and driving a toaster car. Rick's convinced this simulation is amateur hour. An ambulance shows up claiming the president needs concentrated dark matter or he'll die. Rick slams the doors and walks away. Rick decides to scam the scammers. He and Morty put on a fake rap concert in the park to perform their new song about the recipe for concentrated dark matter. Rick makes the crowd do increasingly specific actions. Everyone over 30 do this. Everyone with a red shirt jump up and down until the system freezes from trying to process too many individual commands. They run to the edge of the simulation and jump off. They find the central processing room and start stealing computer chips. Rick says the Zagarians aren't good at much, but they make great chips. He and Morty are laughing, tossing chips at each other, playfully, having a great time. They sneak to an escape pod and fly away. Morty comments that it was surprisingly easy. Rick agrees, saying once again he's flying away with everything, and the Zagarians got nothing. Then the simulation breaks down. They're still on the ship. Prince Nebulon, the Zagarian leader, reveals they're inside a simulation within a simulation. Rick had been completely fooled. The Zagarians now have both the dark matter recipe and the code to Rick's safe. Rick tries to argue he'll just go home and change the combination, but Prince Nebulon says that's why he's never getting home. Rick pulls down Morty's pants, and all the Zagarians back away in disgust, giving them a chance to run. They steal another ship and try to escape. Rick tells Morty they need to make concentrated dark matter to fuel their escape. He lists the ingredients: cesium, plutonic quarks, and bottled water. Morty finds everything in the engine room. Rick tells him the recipe: 2 parts plutonic quarks, 1 part cesium, then empty the water into the bucket and pour it in the fuel tank. Morty freezes. The simulation breaks down again. They're still on the Zygarion ship. Prince Nebulon is laughing hysterically. They're inside a simulation of a simulation inside another giant simulation, 3 layers deep. The Zagarians never had the dark matter recipe, but now they do because Rick just gave it to them, thinking he was in a real escape. Rick's furious, yelling about how they simulated his grandson's genitals. One of the Zagarians mentions that Kevin fought really hard to supervise that project. Kevin gets embarrassed, asking why they had to tell everyone. The Zagarians let Rick and Jerry, who got accidentally trapped in a separate part of the simulation, go home. On the shuttle back to Earth, Jerry points out that Rick got fooled too. Maybe Rick should have some respect for the dummies of the universe now that he's one of them. Rick admits maybe Jerry's right. But here's the thing, Rick sabotaged them. The recipe he gave was fake. When the Zagarians try to make concentrated dark matter using Rick's instructions, their entire spacecraft explodes, killing everyone on board. Rick's playing Baker Street on the radio and vocalizing the saxophone part as the explosion happens behind them. The paranoia doesn't end there. That night, Rick shows up in Morty's bedroom drunk. He's being weirdly affectionate, talking about what a good kid Morty is, how they're friends, how Morty's a real hero. Morty asks if Rick's been drinking. Then, Rick suddenly snaps, holds a knife to Morty's throat, and screams, "You little son of a bi! Are you a simulation? Huh? Are you a simulation?" Morty's terrified. Rick realizes what he's doing, apologizes, calls Morty a good kid, and passes out on the floor. Morty's left sitting there traumatized, saying, "What a life." Rick got played, multiple times, by con artists so incompetent they're galactically famous for failing. Sure, he figured it out eventually and got revenge, but he still fell for their tricks. He genuinely thought he'd escaped. He was celebrating with Morty, tossing computer chips around like they'd won. He gave them a real recipe for concentrated dark matter because he thought he was in an actual escape situation. The aftermath shows how badly it messed with his head. Rick's so paranoid he can't trust reality anymore. He gets drunk and threatens his own grandson with a knife because he can't tell what's real. That's someone who got fooled and is spiraling from it. Jerry had the most successful day of his life in the simulation, sold an advertising pitch, got promoted, won an award. It was all fake, and his boss fires him in reality. But at least Jerry knows he got tricked. Rick pretends he was always one step ahead, while simultaneously having a drunken breakdown about whether anything is real. If that made you facepalm, wait for the next Rick's dumb moment. Rick built an entire universe inside his car battery, where billions of people unknowingly spend their lives generating electricity for his vehicle. When someone in that universe does the exact same thing to him, Rick suddenly has strong opinions about how unethical it is. The whole elaborate disaster was just to avoid changing his car battery like a normal person. In The Ricks Must Be Crazy, Rick, Morty, and Summer are leaving a movie theater when Rick's car won't start. Morty asks if it's the quantum carburetor or something. Rick tells him you can't just add a sci-fi word to a car word and hope it means something. Turns out something's wrong with the microverse battery. They're going to have to go inside. Rick leaves Summer in the car with instructions to stay put and not touch any buttons. He tells the ship to keep Summer safe. The ship immediately starts killing and paralyzing people who approach the car, traumatizing Summer for the rest of the episode. But that's a whole other problem. Rick and Morty shrink down and enter the battery. Morty's confused about why there are people inside a car battery. Rick explains what he built with pride. He put a spatially tessellated void inside a modified temporal field until a planet developed intelligent life. Then he introduced that life to electricity, which they now generate on a global scale. Some of it powers his engine, charges his phone, and stuff. Morty immediately calls it slavery. Rick argues it's society. They work for each other, pay each other, buy houses, get married, have kids that replace them when they get too old to make power. Morty's not impressed. He says that just sounds like slavery with extra steps. Rick responds with, "Someone's gonna get laid in college," dismissing Morty's ethical concerns as naive. They land on the planet where Rick's greeted like a celebrity. There's a holiday called Rick's Giving. Kids learn about Rick in school. He told the people that flipping them off means peace among worlds, so everyone's cheerfully giving him the middle finger. Rick thinks this is hilarious. The president explains they've evolved. Their most brilliant scientist, Zeep Zanflorp, has developed an energy source that makes Google boxes obsolete. Rick wants to see it. Zeep's busy being an arrogant jerk to his assistants, but eventually shows Rick his invention, a miniverse. It's an infinite universe, with a planet capable of generating massive amounts of power. Rick coughs and mutters dumb name under his breath. Zeep asks him to repeat that. Rick plays innocent, asking if they could get a tour of the miniverse from the inside. They shrink down and enter Zeep's miniverse. Inside, Zeep explains his setup. He created an unbounded vacuum inside a temporal field until a world developed. He introduced the people to a device called a flubal crank. What they don't know is that 80% of every crank's energy gets channeled out to be used by Zeep's world. No more Google boxes needed. Rick suddenly becomes very concerned about ethics. He tells Zeep that with no disrespect, what he's doing is really unethical. These people are slaving away, making power. That's what Rick calls slavery. Zeep starts to explain they work for each other in exchange for money, but Rick cuts him off. That just sounds like slavery with extra steps. Zeep responds with, "Eek barba dirkle, somebody's gonna get laid in college." It's Rick's own line thrown back at him in a different language. Morty pulls Rick aside and asks what the hell he's doing, pointing out hypocrisy. Rick realizes Morty's right, hypocrisy. Somewhere on this planet, there's gotta be an arrogant scientist on the verge of microverse technology, which would make Zeep's flubal cranks obsolete. They find Kyle, a scientist working on exactly that, a teenyverse. Kyle's building a pulley-based device called a blubal yank. The people inside won't know he's taking most of their energy. Zeep is horrified. This is wrong. This is slavery. Kyle argues they won't be slaves. They'll work for each other and pay each other money. Zeep starts to say that just sounds like slavery with X, steps, before realizing what's happening. Zeep turns to Rick. Did Rick create his universe? Is his universe a miniverse? Rick corrects him, microverse. Kyle suggests, teenyverse. They start fighting. Rick's shouting that Zeep's his battery, that's all he is. Zeep's yelling back about being created just to power a car. Kyle has an existential crisis, realizing his entire universe was created by someone from another universe, who was created by someone from another universe. He mentions his father died, and he couldn't make time for the funeral because he was working on his universe. The situation spirals. Rick and Zeep end up stranded on a prehistoric planet in Kyle's teenyverse, fighting each other with rocks and sticks. Morty tries to leave and live with the tree people. He comes back months later as their leader, begging Rick and Zeep to put aside their differences because the tree people are backward savages who eat every third baby and everyone smells like piss. He masturbated to an extra curvy piece of driftwood. Morty forces Rick and Zeep to work together. They build a device to escape while bonding over their shared alcoholism and drug addiction. They almost become friends. Then Zeep immediately tries to betray Rick by running to destroy the microverse, which would destroy Rick's battery and trap him forever. Rick chases him through the civilization, eventually catching up and killing Zeep. Before dying, Zeep realizes that Rick was willing to destroy his entire universe if the battery didn't work. Zeep kept the Google boxes running to keep his people alive. Rick gets back to his car, and the engine starts. Zeep understood, if Rick came back to a dead battery, he'd just throw it away and get a new one. So Zeep kept everything running to save his own people. Rick acts like everything worked out because they were just honest with Zeep. Morty points out that Rick killed him. Rick ignores this. They go to get ice cream, which is now ruined because Summer's crisis with the ship led to a peace treaty between humans and giant telepathic spiders, and now flies are in the ice cream due to all beings being equal. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick created an entire universe of sentient beings just to avoid standard car maintenance. He could have used solar panels. He could have used a normal battery. Instead, he built a pocket dimension where billions of people live entire lives thinking they're helping their planet, when really, they're just making Rick's car go. He didn't anticipate someone in that universe would do exactly what he did. Why would he? Rick's arrogance meant he couldn't imagine someone matching his intelligence. When it happened, his only response was to kill that person and threaten to destroy the entire universe if it didn't keep powering his vehicle. The episode ends with a post-credits scene where Morty's in math class and accidentally turns into a car, revealing Rick implanted him with nanobots that could restructure his anatomy into a vehicle. Rick told Morty about this earlier as a distraction, claiming he'd need Morty to turn into a car to escape. It was a lie, but the nanobots were real, and now they're activating randomly in Morty's daily life. Rick created a slavery system with extra steps, got mad when someone copied him, killed his way out of the situation, and learned absolutely nothing. The entire catastrophe was to power a car that he could have just plugged into a normal outlet. That's Rick, in a nutshell, applying infinite intelligence to problems that don't need solving, while creating massive ethical disasters in the process. You thought that was dumb? Oh, buckle up for the next one. Rick built a theme park inside a human body because apparently Six Flags wasn't thinking big enough. When something goes wrong, his solution is to shrink his grandson down to microscopic size and inject him into a dying homeless man, which is basically honey. I Shrunk the Kids meets Saw meets that one episode of The Magic School Bus where Miss Frizzle definitely should have been arrested. In Anatomy Park, it's Christmas at the Smith house, and Jerry's trying to cosplay as a functional patriarch. Rick shows up with Ruben, an old friend who looks like he just finished losing a fight with mortality itself. Rick claims he checks in on Ruben once a year for a medical evaluation, which Beth finds sweet. Nothing says I care, quite like annual check-ins with someone you're using as real estate for a theme park, right? Rick drags Ruben to the garage where he's laid out on a ping pong table looking like the before picture in a multivitamin ad. Rick tells Morty he needs to find Dr. Xenon bloom inside Ruben. Morty asks where, thinking maybe Ruben, Minnesota, or some other normal answer. Rick clarifies, inside Ruben's body, the Ruben on the table. The clearly dying any second now Ruben. Rick doesn't have time for Morty to wrap his little walnut around everything, so he just shrinks him down without explaining minor details like, hey, this guy might die with you inside him. It's the medical equivalent of texting, we need to talk, and then throwing your phone into the ocean. Morty screams as he's miniaturized and loaded into a syringe, which Rick stabs directly into Ruben's chest. OSHA would like a word. Morty lands inside and discovers Anatomy Park, a full amusement park complete with Spleen Mountain, Bladder Falls, and Pirates of the Pancreas. Rick's very defensive about that last one, by the way. Someone definitely told him it was a dumb idea, and he's still processing the emotional damage. Rick explains, it's a business venture. Science isn't cheap. Never mind that he could have just gotten a Patreon like every other broke creator. The park is also a living museum of humanity's most dangerous diseases. Hepatitis A, tuberculosis, gonorrhea, bubonic plague. You know, typical theme park attractions. It's like Jurassic Park, except instead of life finds a way, it's death finds a way, and also you might catch something. The security system's down, and all the diseases are loose, which means Morty and the park staff are basically playing a deadly game of tag with humanity's greatest hits of things that killed millions of people. They're running from hepatitis A like it's a Black Friday sale at Target. One employee named Alexander gets coughed out of Ruben's mouth and dies when his skin peels off. The show really said, magic school bus, but make it body horror. Then Ruben's heart monitor flatlines. Rick casually says, I can't cure death, and tosses away his syringe like he's giving up on a Rubik's Cube. Everyone inside is now trapped in what's essentially a rotting organic prison. The body starts decomposing faster than Twitter's credibility, filling with gas like a biological time bomb. Their escape plan? Get to the colon, where there's a growth ray. Nothing says, well-designed emergency exit, like having to travel through the entire digestive system to maybe survive. They fight through gonorrhea in the small intestines, which they blow up using methane gas, creative problem solving, or arson, both. Ride the bone train through the skeletal system, and watch multiple people die along the way. Roger gets his foot stuck, activating the growth ray, and drowns in, well, let's just say he drowned in the reason you don't want to be stuck in a corpse's colon. His last words are about how his wife kept her last name and the kids took it too, which is somehow both tragic and a weirdly specific detail to include in your final moments. Rick has an epiphany about relative size, thanks to Jerry being depressed about his parents' new polyamorous lifestyle, whole other subplot. He loads Ruben's corpse into his spaceship, flies to Earth's orbit, straps dynamite to the body, and enlarges it to the size of a small country hovering over America. Ruben's giant naked corpse is visible from coast to coast. His face looms over New York. His poorly maintained toes shadow Los Angeles. His genitals hover over the Rocky Mountains, terrifying a lumberjack into an early retirement. The news covers it like it's a weather phenomenon. Giant naked sky Santa, they call him, which is somehow the least weird part of this whole situation. Rick rescues Morty and Annie through Ruben's nipple. Sure, why not? Then the dynamite explodes. The entire corpse detonates in orbit, sending blood, organs, and chunks of what used to be a human being raining down across the United States during Christmas. It's like if White Christmas was directed by John Carpenter. The Smith family's outside, about to go sledding, when the blood starts falling. They rush inside, where Jerry's watching the news calmly report that everything should be fine, while America gets bukkaked by a corpse explosion. The episode aired on Adult Swim, so technically this was all in good fun. Here's the thing. Rick built this park inside a guy who was clearly circling the drain. He admits Ruben's seen some rough years, and you don't agree to have a theme park built inside you if your life's going great. So Rick knew Ruben was a ticking time bomb, and still chose him as his business model. It's like opening a McDonald's inside a volcano and being surprised when things get hot. There was zero contingency planning. No, if host dies, press this button protocol. The only evacuation route required traveling through the entire digestive system to reach equipment that might work. Multiple people died because Rick treated theme park safety regulations like they were optional DLC. And Rick learned absolutely nothing. By the end, he meets Annie, who can build a new park, mentions Pirates of the Pancreas positively, and Rick immediately shrinks her down to inject into someone else. He's building Anatomy Park 2, Medical Malpractice Boogaloo, before the first one's even been hosed off the sidewalks. The post-credits scene shows Rick furiously hanging up on his new creative team because they suggested maybe pirates don't make thematic sense for a pancreas, which produces insulin, not treasure. He's ranting to Ethan about how they're building a monument to compromise, while Ethan's just lying there being the new human real estate. Rick cares more about his pirate-themed organ ride getting respect than the body count. This whole disaster could have been avoided by literally any other approach. Use a younger, healthier person. Have better safety measures. Maybe don't build an amusement park inside someone at all. But Rick chose the dying homeless vet, sent his grandson in blind, and solved the crisis by pulling a Galactus on America's Christmas. It's monumentally stupid, wildly unethical, and somehow ends with the news telling everyone to just go about their day, despite being covered in human remains. Which is either brilliant satire or the show writers giving up on making any of this make sense. Probably both. Manasade, Manasider, anyone. And if you think Rick couldn't possibly top that, think again next dumb moment. And if you're enjoying our content, subscribe to our channel. Rick got so jealous of Morty liking a superhero team that he blacked out on alien liquor, single-handedly murdered the galaxy's biggest villain, and built an elaborate torture maze that killed multiple heroes, all because his feelings got hurt. It's basically if Jigsaw from Saw was motivated by daddy issues and solved with a 12-step program. In Vindicators 3, The Return of World Ender, Morty's cleaning up sterilizing slugs in the garage when the Vindibeacon starts glowing. The Vindicators are calling them to assemble. Morty's pumped these are his heroes, the guardians of the unguarded. Rick's less impressed, calling them drama queens, who spend an hour talking and 20 minutes jumping around while stuff explodes. Morty pulls out his Morty Adventure card. He gets to choose one in every 10 adventures, and this is his pick. Rick's forced to comply, stamping the card while muttering about how he warned Morty. Nothing says healthy family dynamic, like contractually obligated bonding time. They teleport to the Vindicator command ship where the team's assembled. Supernova, telekinetic leader, million ants, literally a million ants in human form. Crocubot, half crocodile, half robot. Alan Rails, summons ghost trains. And Vance Maximus, the cool guy with jetpacks and laser cannons. Rick immediately starts roasting everyone. He calls million ants, Turd Man, Wiggly Turd Man, and asks Crocubot if he fell into a vat of redundancy. Morty realizes this is Vindicators 3, meaning they did Vindicators 2 without Rick and Morty. Several Vindicators died in that mission. The article Morty reads later says they weren't invited due to personality conflicts, which Rick interprets as the universe's most backhanded compliment. They needed him so badly, they got 3 heroes killed, trying to avoid him. That night, Rick's visibly hurt when Morty says the Vindicators are his heroes. Rick leaves to get a drink through a portal. Cut to the next morning, the Vindicators find Rick passed out on the conference table with his pants down, lying in puddles of his own diarrhea. The show really committed to this visual. They arrive at World Ender's base, fight through security, and find World Ender's lair filled with massacred henchmen. Then they see World Ender himself gutted, hanging from a hook, clearly tortured before death. Rick tries to bail immediately, but the windows seal shut. A monitor lowers showing drunk Rick, adjusting a camera, and announcing, "Welcome to your reckoning, baby." Sober Rick realizes what happened. He got so wasted he came back during a blackout, killed World Ender solo, and set up a Saw-style death game for the Vindicators. When Rick tries to leave, he discovers he left his portal gun in the bathroom on the ship. They're trapped. The first challenge is a matching game. Match the Vindicators' gimmicks with their faces in 3 minutes, or die. Vance Maximus freaks out, calls Morty, the learning disabled kid we do photo ops with, ouch, and flies into a ventilation shaft. The shaft contains rapid-fire guns, chainsaws, electrical traps, and slicing blades. His lower half falls back down. His rocket boot activates, and his remains fly around the room, splattering blood everywhere, until Crocubot lasers them. Morty solves the puzzle. All the descriptors apply to all of them. Drunk Rick's point is, none of them are special. The doors open. Next room, a holographic star map. Drunk Rick asks them to identify where they've fought evil, but refuse to mention. Crocubot confidently picks Dorian 5, where the Vindicators exterminated an entire planet to kill the shape-shifting villain Doomnometron. The platform claps together like a giant metal sandwich and crushes Crocubot to death. Morty picks Israel, Rick's go-to drunk rambling topic, and they proceed. Third room, basketball challenge. Make 5 3-pointers in 5 minutes, or a neutrino bomb destroys the planet. While the Vindicators play, personal drama erupts. Alan Rails discovers his ex-wife Supernova had an affair with million ants. They had a child together that died inside her because it was 500,000 ants and half collapsing star. The show's commitment to horrifying biology is impressive. Million ants enters Alan's mouth and expands him until he explodes. Supernova kills million ants by removing and crushing his queen ant. Rick and Morty disable the neutrino bomb while covered in Alan's remains. Final room. Drunk Rick says, the Vindicators have one thing he values. Place it on the platform, or the solar system explodes. Rick guesses it's Morty, reasoning that blackout drunk Rick felt like he was losing Morty to the Vindicators. Morty steps on the platform feeling smug about Rick's hidden affection. The platform opens, and Morty rides a dark ride-style cart through cardboard cutouts, while drunk Rick delivers an emotional message about appreciating someone sticking by him, despite everyone having their heads up their asses. Morty's touched until drunk Rick clarifies he's talking to Noob Noob, the janitor who laughed at Rick's jokes. The emotional whiplash here is chef's kiss. Supernova tries to kill Rick and Morty to preserve the Vindicators' reputation, but the platform rises to reveal they're at a massive party Rick planned while drunk. Logic's performing. Worldender's corpse is a photo op. Beth and Summer are there. Rick invited everyone and booked entertainment, all while blacked out. Here's what makes this catastrophically stupid. Rick's alcoholism and jealousy combined into a deadly tantrum that killed multiple heroes. He was so drunk he defeated the galaxy's biggest threat, solo, something the Vindicators couldn't do. Sober then built elaborate death traps because his grandson liked other people. Drunk Rick murdered Worldender, torturing him first. Constructed multiple rooms with complex puzzles and fatal consequences. Wired everything together. Recorded video messages while wearing costume changes. Deerstalker cap, Hawaiian shirt. Planned an entire party with catering and celebrity entertainment, and forgot all of it by morning. That's operating heavy machinery while your brain's running on fumes and spite. Sober Rick couldn't solve his own drunk puzzles. When Morty's trying to defuse the neutrino bomb, Rick's like, "Where is the lead wire?" And, "What a bad neutrino bomb? It's a miracle I actually destroy anything." He's insulting his own blackout craftsmanship. The whole scheme was motivated by insecurity. Morty calls it out Rick's jealous. Rick deflects, but Morty's right. Rick couldn't handle that Morty admired someone else, so he drunkenly orchestrated their deaths to prove they weren't worthy of that admiration. It's the world's most elaborate, "I told you so," powered by alcohol and abandonment issues. Multiple people died because Rick can't process emotions without a bottle. Vance got mulched in a ventilation shaft. Crokybot got pancaked. Alan exploded from ant expansion. Million ants got dequeened. And Rick learned nothing. At the party, when Morty says they don't need Vindicators, Rick just shrugs it off and asks who Noob Noob is. The episode's darkly hilarious take on Rick's alcoholism. He's more competent drunk than most people are sober, but he's also building death traps for his grandson's role models. And the Vindicators kinda deserve the roasting. The genocide on Dorian 5 was sketchy, but maybe don't murder them about it? Just a thought. If that was ridiculous. The next one is straight up unbelievable. Rick stole horse sperm from his daughter's veterinary hospital to make a bioweapon against underground cannibal horse people. Solid plan, except he didn't check if it was actually horse sperm. Turns out his grandson had been secretly using the horse breeding equipment for personal reasons, so the barrel was contaminated with human DNA. Rick's otherworldly forces experiment created giant sentient sperm monsters that nearly ended civilization. It's basically Jurassic Park, but with jizz. In Rickdependence Spray, Morty's at Beth's horse hospital looking at a breeding mount, the machine they use to collect reproductive material from horses. Beth explains what it does, while Morty's acting suspiciously interested in volunteering there after school. Later, he sneaks back and uses it himself repeatedly. The show commits fully to this premise, I'll give them that. Rick's in the garage, working on a bioweapon to use against the Chuds, the underground-dwelling cannibal horse people. They're always fighting. He's got a barrel of horse semen from Beth's hospital that he's planning to subject to otherworldly forces. Morty walks in and asks what Rick's doing. Rick explains his plan like it's the most normal Saturday project ever. Morty freaks out, asking if Rick asked Beth permission. Rick says yes, obviously he asked, which is somehow the least believable part of this whole scenario. Morty keeps pushing Rick to test the sperm and make sure it's actually horse sperm. Rick gets annoyed. Why doesn't Morty trust labels? Morty's being weirdly insistent, but Rick caves and agrees not to test it. Rick starts running, an inhuman amount of power through the semen. He says it should be safe, since the semen itself is also inhuman. Morty's sweating bullets. The experiment activates, and suddenly giant monster sperm burst out of the barrel and start attacking. They're massive, sentient, man-eating creatures with teeth. They break out of the garage and start terrorizing the neighborhood. Rick immediately blames himself unless there was something about the sperm he didn't know. He looks at Morty suggestively. Morty asks if Rick's messing with him, trying to get him to admit something. Rick genuinely has no idea what Morty's talking about. Morty realizes Rick doesn't know the truth and decides to keep lying, saying it's Rick's fault. The family escapes in the car while giant sperm monsters are destroying everything. Beth's running over neighbors. Jerry asks how big space dicks must be to produce space sperm this size, because everyone's still pretending these came from space. The president calls Rick, demanding answers. Rick pulls Morty aside and asks him to keep the secret of where the sperm actually came from. Morty agrees way too easily, saying sometimes you just gotta wipe it off, toss it in the trash, and head back to study hall. Rick doesn't get the metaphor, but accepts the help. The president's trying to figure out if Rick caused this, or if it's the chuds. Morty gives this patriotic speech about America, inventing apple pies and lasers, saying they don't know nothing about the sperm. The president decides to blame the chuds and declares war. Professor Shabubu, the world's leading sperm expert, imagine having that on your business card, tracks the sperm to the Grand Canyon. Because, of course, they're heading for Americas. You know, the president wants to nuke them. Rick and Morty volunteer to handle it with zero trace left behind. They fly out with Marines, but the sperm have built a trebuchet. Rick corrects Morty, it's a trebuchet, not a catapult, because apparently monster sperm understands siege weapon engineering. The Marines get slaughtered. One guy named Blazin seems cool and invincible until he gets killed while wearing his wife's thong and holding a picture of Sports Illustrated model Kathy Ireland that he claims is his wife. Rick and Morty get captured by the sperm queen, who reveals she knows Morty's the father. She's using Beth's breeding mount machine to create an army. Rick realizes Morty's been lying this whole time. Morty breaks down, confessing he spent a week using animal equipment and kept lying because he was ashamed. The president's plan is to lure the sperm with a giant egg, Summer's egg, which they enlarged. Morty realizes they're about to create a giant incest baby and tries to stop them, but it's too late. The sperm are heading for Vegas, where the egg is being launched. Rick ends the centuries-long war with the chuds by claiming he got the chud princess pregnant. He didn't, but it gives them immunity and brings chud reinforcements. The chuds and humans team up to fight the sperm monsters in Las Vegas. One sperm, who Morty named Sticky and befriended earlier, sacrifices himself to stop the lead sperm from reaching the egg, but he fails. The egg gets fertilized. They launch it into space to avoid dealing with it, where it becomes a giant incest baby floating around Earth. The episode ends with an astronaut seeing the giant baby in space, calling it his conscience before it presumably kills him. The baby becomes a recurring background element in later episodes, just floating there as a constant reminder of this disaster. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick's entire test it to make sure philosophy, which he literally says aloud, measure twice, cut once, especially with semen, gets abandoned because Morty annoys him by insisting he should test it. Rick's so contrarian that he refuses to follow his own scientific principles just because someone else suggested them. The whole catastrophe stems from Rick not checking his materials before running them through otherworldly forces. Basic lab safety, day one stuff. He steals biological material, doesn't verify it, cranks it up to maximum power, and acts surprised when unexpected DNA creates unexpected results. And the lie compounds everything. If Morty had just admitted the truth immediately, they could have contained it. Instead, Morty's shame about using a horse masturbation machine leads to him covering it up, which leads to the president declaring war on the chuds, which nearly causes a three-way apocalypse between humans, chuds, and sentient sperm. The giant incest baby becomes a permanent fixture of the show's universe, floating in space, occasionally showing up to remind everyone of that time. Rick didn't check his samples, and Morty couldn't admit to being a horny teenager. It's visible from Earth. Astronauts encounter it. It's just there now, forever, because Rick skipped one verification step. The episode's basically a PSA about two things. 1. Always verify your lab materials before experimenting. And 2. Teenage shame leads to apocalyptic consequences. Also, 3. Maybe don't steal horse semen to make bioweapons, but that seems like it should go without saying. Rick's defense that he blamed himself unless there was something about the sperm he didn't know is particularly rich. There was something he didn't know because he didn't check. That's the whole point of testing. You test things specifically to discover what you don't know. The show later reveals Rick and the Chud Princess didn't actually have a kid, she just made it up for diplomatic immunity. So Rick got out of that situation, at least. But the giant incest baby remains, circling Earth like the world's worst satellite, a permanent monument to the time Rick's laziness and Morty's horniness nearly ended civilization. And yeah, it actually gets even dumber moving on to the next Rick's dumb moment. Rick escaped from space prison, destroyed an entire galactic government, and came home acting like a hero, all so he could manipulate his daughter into divorcing her husband. Why? Because Jerry threatened to snitch on him. It's the most elaborate FU in television history, powered by spite and a complete disregard for his family's happiness. In the Rickshank Redemption, Rick's been captured by the Galactic Federation and is locked in their maximum security prison. They've got him hooked up to a brainalyzer, trying to extract the formula for his portal gun technology. The bug alien interrogating him thinks he's winning, but Rick's playing 4D chess while everyone else is still figuring out checkers. Rick manufactures a fake memory about inventing portal travel, complete with a tragic origin story, where another Rick kills his wife Diane and daughter Beth with a bomb. The Federation thinks they got the formula. They didn't. It's a virus. Rick takes control of the brainalyzer, transfers his consciousness into the interrogator's body, then jumps between different Rick bodies as he escapes, eventually taking over the commander-in-chief of the Citadel of Ricks. He teleports the entire Citadel into Federation space, causing chaos. He infiltrates Federation systems with level 9 access and changes a 1 to a 0, collapsing their entire centralized currency. The Blemflark goes from worth 1 of itself to 0. The galactic economy implodes instantly. The Federation president shoots himself. Workers riot over jackets and pants. The government literally tears itself apart. Back on Earth, which had been occupied by the Federation, everything collapses. Jerry's been enjoying his Federation job where he gets paid in pills and doesn't know what he does. Suddenly, he's crawling through chaos trying to survive. Beth finds him, and they have this moment where she apologizes for ever indulging Rick, asking if there's anything left to lose. Jerry says, just each other, and they're having a genuine reconciliation moment. Then Rick shows up. Guess who dismantled the government? He's casual, asking for light beer like he just got back from vacation instead of prison. Jerry tries to assert himself, foot down time. He gives Beth the ultimatum everyone saw coming. It's him or me. Beth doesn't even hesitate. Rick leaves to give them privacy. Beth tells Jerry he's going to spend some time divorced. Jerry moves out. Summer's excited because aliens are being drawn and quartered in the school courtyard, and it technically counts as patriotism. The show's dark humor really hits different in this episode. Then comes the garage scene where Rick drops the truth bomb on Morty. He explains that Jerry crossed him by threatening to turn him in to the government. So, Rick made Jerry and the government go away. He's replaced them both as the de facto patriarch of your family and your universe. Rick admits Beth wouldn't have accepted him back without Morty and Summer. So, now you know the real reason I rescued you. He didn't save them out of love, he saved them as props to manipulate Beth. He explicitly says, I just took over the family, Morty, and threatens that if Morty tells Beth or Summer, he'll deny it, and they'll take his side because I'm a hero. The monologue keeps going. Rick says Morty has to do whatever he says forever now. Then he pivots to his real motivation, getting McDonald's Szechuan sauce from the 1,998 Mulan promotion. He claims that's his series arc, not avenging his dead family, which was fake, anyway. 9 more seasons of searching for dipping sauce. 97 more years, Morty. It's played for absurdist comedy, but buried in the joke is Rick openly admitting he destroyed his daughter's marriage for revenge. Jerry's crime? Threatening to call the cops on an interdimensional fugitive who kept endangering the family. That's it. Jerry tried to protect his family from Rick's chaos, and Rick's response was to orchestrate a divorce. The plan worked flawlessly. Rick predicted Jerry would give an ultimatum. He knew Beth would choose her father over her husband because of her abandonment issues. He manufactured the entire situation to achieve maximum control over the family while punishing Jerry for disloyalty. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick won the battle but lost the war. By season 4, Beth and Jerry reconcile. Rick's iron grip on the family gradually loosens as everyone realizes how toxic his presence is. His master plan to become patriarch backfires as the family develops boundaries and stops enabling him. The divorce traumatizes the kids. Summer becomes more cynical and aggressive. Morty loses faith in both his parents and in Rick. The family dynamic Rick worked so hard to control becomes increasingly dysfunctional, pushing everyone further from him rather than closer. And for what? Petty revenge against Jerry. Not even evil Jerry, just regular Jerry, who made one reasonable threat to involve authorities when his father-in-law kept nearly getting everyone killed. Rick nuked a marriage over that. The Szechuan sauce bit became a massive cultural phenomenon, leading to actual riots at McDonald's when they brought it back, but it obscures the darker admission underneath. Rick literally says he's not driven by avenging my dead family. The fake tragic backstory was just manipulation. His real motivation is pettiness and control. The episode presents this as Rick at his most powerful. He outsmarted the Federation, the Citadel, and his own family all at once. But it's actually Rick at his most pathetic. He spent unknown amounts of time in prison, endured interrogation, collapsed an entire government, and risked his grandkids' lives, all to win a dick measuring contest with Jerry Smith. Think about the effort to payoff ratio here. Rick could have just left. He could have portaled away, lived anywhere in infinite universes, and avoided Jerry entirely. Instead, he orchestrated this elaborate revenge plot that required 1. Getting captured, 2. Surviving Federation prison, 3. Manipulating his interrogators, 4. Escaping multiple times while body hopping, 5. Taking over the Citadel, 6. Destroying the Federation economy, and 7. Timing his return perfectly to maximize family drama, all to make Jerry move out. The post-credits scene teases Phoenix Person, formerly Bird Person, Rick's best friend who was killed and revived as a cyborg, showing the Federation still has assets and Rick's made powerful enemies. His grand plan created more problems than it solved. Classic Rick brilliantly executing a catastrophically short-sighted strategy. By season 5, Beth and Jerry's reconciliation is solid. They're actually communicating better and supporting each other. Rick's relegated to the garage more often, losing his central position in the family. His kids start calling out his manipulation. The patriarch he crowned himself becomes increasingly irrelevant to the family's actual dynamics. Rick destroyed his daughter's marriage out of spite, admitted it to Morty while threatening him into silence, and ultimately achieved nothing except proving he's the pettiest genius in the multiverse. He can topple empires but can't handle his son-in-law being mildly annoying. If that was a train wreck, the next one's a full-blown explosion, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Rick transferred his consciousness into a teenage clone body to hunt vampires at high school, then got trapped by adolescent brain chemistry that turned him into a manic party boy, while his real self slowly died in a vat, screaming for help through song lyrics. It's basically 13. Going on 30 meets Get Out, meets every mid-2000s emo band's music video, except the body snatcher is yourself, and nobody believes you're dying because you're too busy being rad. In Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Morty casually mentions a lunch lady got murdered 2 holes in her neck, all the blood gone. Rick immediately IDs it as vampire activity, like he's announcing the weather. Summer asks if Rick could turn himself into a teenager to help them hunt down Nosferatu's substitute teaching cousin. Rick's response is peak Rick. Why in the F would I ever do that? And how dare you even ask me that? He calls high school a zit-covered, hormone-addled, low-stakes ass world, which honestly isn't even an insult, just an accurate description of the American public education system. But Rick gets bored after dropping Beth and Jerry at alien couples therapy and decides, why be a grumpy douche? He'll transfer his mind into a younger clone and get embroiled in some youthful hijinks, famous last words before every terrible decision. Enter Tiny Rick. Basically, if Rick took a handful of Zoloft and chased it with a Red Bull, he's making friends, getting compliments on his lab coat, shouting, Tiny Rick, every 5 seconds like it's his Pokemon catchphrase. They successfully hunt down Coach Ferratu, yes, that's his fake name, because apparently this vampire watched one Dracula movie and thought, subtlety is for losers. Mission accomplished, time to go home. Except Tiny Rick wants to stay for Summer's party, just one more night. What could go wrong? At the party, Tiny Rick grabs a guitar and performs what he claims is an improvised song. Let me out divided by what you see is not the same person as me, divided by my life's a lie, divided by I'm not who you're looking at, divided by let me out, set me free, divided by I'm really old. This isn't me, divided by my real body's slowly dying in a vat. The crowd goes absolutely wild. They think it's the sickest original track they've ever heard. Nobody realizes it's a literal SOS from the real Rick desperately trying to communicate that he's actually dying. It's like if someone was genuinely choking, and everyone thought they were doing the Heimlich maneuver dance from TikTok. Summer starts noticing red flags. Tiny Rick's drawing disturbing artwork with "Help me Morty and Summer" scrawled across it. When confronted, Tiny Rick dismisses it as his emo streak that makes him rad. He compares it to Knight Rider. The car's name was Kit. Nobody rode Michael Knight, which is both factually incorrect and a completely unhinged defense of your cry for help artwork. Summer figures out what happened. Teenage brains are biologically wired to repress bad thoughts and stay optimistic. Your brain shoves existential dread into a mental storage unit and throws away the key. But for Rick, those bad thoughts are his personality. The awareness of mortality, the understanding that nothing matters, the crushing weight of infinite universes, that's regular Rick. Tiny Rick is just the teenage defense mechanism running Rick's body like a stolen car. The real Rick is trapped in there, screaming through the only channels available angsty music and edgy art. And everyone's ignoring it because those are exactly what normal teenagers do. It's basically The Boy Who Cried Wolf, except the wolf is death, and the boy is a genius trapped in a clone body. Morty doesn't want to help. He's happy. Tiny Rick is fun. Regular Rick makes everyone miserable. He tells Summer to get your stuff together, the entire rant about putting all your stuff in a backpack, taking it to the store. This monologue became one of the show's most quoted moments, despite being Morty defending the objectively wrong position. At the school dance, Tiny Rick performs another desperate banger. Let me out, divided by, this is not a dance, divided by, I'm begging for help. I'm screaming for help, divided by, please come let me out, divided by, I'm dying in a vat in the garage. Everyone thinks he invented a sick new dance move. Jessica asks Morty to slow dance afterward. The vibes are immaculate, except for the dying grandpa thing. Summer plants evidence to get Tiny Rick expelled. Tiny Rick turns vicious, calling her a psycho nerd in front of the whole school. Eventually, they drag Tiny Rick back to the garage. Morty says if Tiny Rick's gonna be an asshole to his sister, he'll do what real Rick would do, beat his ass. Nothing says, I love you, Grandpa, like a fist fight to save his life. The breakthrough. Summer plays Elliott Smith's music and forces Tiny Rick to feel the teenage angst. Tiny Rick starts spiraling. Oh God, what is life? How can someone so talented die so young? What is being young? I'm not young. I'm old. I'm gonna die. My body isn't real. The real Rick breaks through, panicking. They connect the transfer wires, and Rick returns to his old body, immediately naked and complaining about his bones scraping together. Then the camera pans to show multiple dead Ricks in the garage failed Operation Phoenix attempts. Rick's been testing consciousness transfer repeatedly, and it keeps killing him. The show casually drops this absolutely horrifying reveal like, oh yeah, there's a pile of your grandpa's corpses in the garage, no big deal. Rick admits Operation Phoenix isn't the fallback he thought it would be. His immortality backup plan is fundamentally broken, and he's been dying repeatedly trying to fix it. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick assumed he could override biology with intelligence. He treated a teenage brain like a VR headset he could put on and take off whenever. But brains aren't hardware, they're biological systems with their own chemical processes. Adolescent neurochemistry is designed to make you optimistic, social, and present-focused, because evolution discovered that helps teenagers survive long enough to reproduce. Rick's existential dread is incompatible with those systems. His consciousness got filtered through dopamine and serotonin until only the fun parts remained. The smartest man in the universe got defeated by hormones. His greatest enemy wasn't an alien empire or a rival Rick, it was puberty. When someone literally screams, I'm dying in a vat in the garage, and you're used to teenagers being dramatic about everything, you just assume it's artistic expression. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Except the wolf is neuroscience, and everyone's too busy vibing to notice. The pile of dead Ricks suggests Rick's been experimenting with this for a while, and it keeps going wrong, but Rick being Rick just keeps trying. This is like if Tony Stark kept building Iron Man suits that exploded and just shrugged like, well, eventually one of these won't kill me. Rick didn't account for the fact that your brain isn't separate from you, your consciousness is your brain's processes. Change the brain chemistry, change the consciousness. The teenage brain didn't care about his IQ or his inventions. It just did what teenage brains do, and Rick almost got permanently deleted for it. Tiny Rick became a fan favorite meme, despite being a horror story about dying alone, while everyone thinks you're just having fun. The internet will truly meme anything, even existential body horror. That's the real lesson here, not that Rick's hubris nearly killed him, but that everyone's too distracted by the bops to notice the death rattles. You think that was bad? The next Rick's dumb moment says, hold my portal gun. Rick froze time for half a year, so Summer and Morty could clean the house after throwing a party, then nearly destroyed all of reality when unfreezing it caused time to fracture into unstable timelines. A fourth-dimensional being showed up specifically to arrest Rick for stealing the time crystal, suggesting this wasn't his first cosmic crime. The entire universe almost ceased to exist because Rick wanted to avoid getting grounded. In A Rickle in Time, the episode opens with everything frozen except Rick, Morty, and Summer. They're cleaning up after a massive party. Morty's vacuuming Jerry with a hand vac while Summer criticizes his technique. She mentions they've been doing this for 6 months, 6 actual months of frozen time, just to clean a house. They also forgot to put a mattress under Mr. Benson, who's been frozen mid-fall off the roof for the entire 6 months. Rick warns them that when he unfreezes time, Their personal time needs to stabilize. He specifically tells them not to touch their parents or they could shatter into countless theoretical shards. His advice? Relax and stop being a pussy. Rick unfreezes time. Mr. Benson falls and presumably dies. Jerry and Beth come home to find the house mysteriously clean. Rick gives them $500 in cash and tells them to get ice cream, physically kicking the money across the floor because he can't hand it to them directly without destroying himself. Jerry's shirt is on backwards, which could blow their cover, but Jerry claims he likes it that way. Crisis averted. Then Summer and Morty start arguing about whose job it was to put the mattress under Mr. Benson. Rick confirms it was Summer's responsibility. Morty rubs it in. Summer calls him a vindictive little turd. Morty calls her a big female asshole. Reality splits. Alternate versions of themselves appear. Rick freaks out. What the hell. Time fractures into two timelines because Summer and Morty were uncertain about who was at fault. They've created a feedback loop of uncertainty that split our reality into two equally possible impossibilities. Rick opens the garage door to reveal floating cats, trees, and islands suspended in timeless void. They're no longer on any timeline. They're hypothetical, like Schrodinger's cats. Their parents still exist somewhere, but Rick, Summer, and Morty are lost in oblivion. Rick tries to merge the timelines using the time crystal, but the kids' continued uncertainty keeps splitting them apart. He gives them a harsh reality check. They're both equally mercurial, overly sensitive, clingy, hysterical, bird-brained homunculi, and he can't tell them apart because he measures people by amount of pain in my ass. Just as they're about to merge successfully, Rick realizes the other Rick isn't trying to merge anymore, he's trying to kill him. Rick figures it's easier to eliminate one timeline than merge them. The Ricks start fighting each other across timelines, shooting and calling each other psychotic. Reality splits into 4 timelines as uncertainty increases. Summer and Morty knock out all the Ricks with fire extinguishers and put him in a dog crate. Rick calls his own voicemail to prove he's calm now, leaves himself an apology, and finds 3 identical messages from other Ricks. He's made peace with himself across timelines. Then a 4th-dimensional being floats into view, basically a giant talking testicle. He's furious they broke time twice. He immediately recognizes Rick stole the time crystal. The testicle monster puts collars on them to sync their timelines and announces he's taking them to time prison, where they do the same thing they do in every other prison, only forever. He's hoping this arrest will get him promoted. He doesn't want to be an omniscient, immortal being his whole life. Rick tricks him by pointing out that, as an immortal being with infinite time, there's a 100% chance he'll eventually do everything, including turning around. The monster admits he can't argue with that logic. Rick hits him with a wrench and grabs his organic gun, which runs into the street and gets hit by a car. The testicle monster screams, "You killed my gun, Chris," because the gun was named Chris and they were friends. Rick tells Summer and Morty to take off their collars and embrace uncertainty. Time splits into 2, then 4, then 8, then 32 timelines as they gang up on the testicle monster across multiple realities. Rick needs to fix the collars but gets indecisive about which screwdriver to use. Phillips or flathead, time splits into 64 timelines. In one timeline, Morty's collar latch breaks. All the other timelines merge successfully, leaving just that one Rick and Morty about to cease existing. Rick prays to God desperately, "Please God in heaven, please God, O Lord, hear my prayers," fixes the collar at the last second, then immediately goes, "F you, God, not today." They're back. Rick's doing the Cabbage Patch dance. Morty mentions he now has 63 memories of everything and thinks one Rick maybe sacrificed himself. Rick tells him to shut up. "The last time you felt something, we all almost died." Beth and Jerry come home from their ice cream date, where they hit a deer, and Beth performed emergency surgery in a Cold Stone Creamery parking lot. Summer and Morty run up to hug them, genuinely happy to see their parents alive. Jerry roasts their time collars with increasingly bad jokes for 2 solid minutes. The post-credits scene shows 2 testicle monsters traveling through time looking for Rick. They find Albert Einstein instead and beat him up by mistake. Einstein defiantly writes E equals mc squared afterward. "I will mess with time." Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick froze time for 6 months to avoid one conversation with Beth and Jerry about a house party. He could have just cleaned faster, portaled away the mess, or memory wiped his daughter. Instead, he stole contraband from 4th-dimensional beings and risked temporal collapse. The testicle monster's reaction suggests Rick's a known criminal in the 4th dimension. There's apparently a time prison with infinite sentences, implying this is a whole justice system Rick's been evading. He admits up front, "This is why you don't freeze time, you guys. It's incredibly irresponsible." He knows this is reckless and did it anyway. The fighting himself sequence shows Rick's immediate assumption when things go wrong is that another version of himself must be evil. He gets into a shootout with himself because he doesn't trust himself. That's some next-level self-hatred with a body count. Summer and Morty nearly die multiple times because Rick can't decide between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers. The smartest man in the universe, defeated by basic tool selection. In one timeline, he's literally praying to God, a being he claims doesn't exist, begging for his life. Then immediately takes credit when he survives and taunts the god he just begged. Beth and Jerry's subplot about saving a deer is genuinely more responsible than anything Rick does. They perform surgery in a parking lot to save an animal's life. Meanwhile, Rick's breaking space-time because he wanted to party without consequences. The whole disaster stems from Rick's refusal to accept basic accountability. He could have taken the L, let Beth ground him, and moved on. Instead, he committed cosmic crimes, nearly destroyed reality multiple times, killed a fourth-dimensional being, and his gun friend, Chris, and traumatized his grandkids with 63 simultaneous memories of almost dying. Rick's takeaway? The last time you felt something, we all almost died. He learned nothing. The collars stay on for the rest of the season as a physical reminder of this catastrophic decision-making, and Jerry spends 2 minutes roasting them for looking like they're from Tron. Freezing time for 6 months to clean a house perfectly captures Rick's worldview. Infinite power applied to mundane problems, with zero consideration for consequences. The episode reveals that Rick's certainty is mostly bravado. When death approaches, he breaks down and prays, then immediately takes credit for surviving. It's the emotional maturity of a teenager, combined with the destructive capability of a nuclear weapon. If you're still with me after that, let's dive into the next dumb moment. Rick casually admits he created Aberdolf Linkler by combining Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler's DNA in an attempt to make a morally neutral superleader. Instead, he created a walking existential crisis, a suffering clone torn between liberating slaves and committing genocide, who's understandably pissed about being born. It's basically The Fly meets The Boys, meets every What If We Played God movie ever made, except the monster crashes house parties. In Ricksy business, Beth and Jerry leave Rick in charge while they go on a Titanic-themed getaway, whole separate subplot involving Jerry getting held at gunpoint by a Titanic superfan. Very Cape Fear, not our focus here. Rick immediately throws a massive interdimensional party with aliens, bird person, and a cat creature named Squanchy, who does unspeakable things in closets. Then a wall explodes like the Kool-Aid Man's angry cousin. Through the dust walks Aberdolf Linkler, half Abraham Lincoln, half Adolf Hitler, all disaster. He's got the stovepipe hat energy mixed with the Third Reich vibes, which is exactly as uncomfortable as it sounds. Rick tries to hide like he just spotted his ex at Whole Foods. Summer asks who invited him. Rick mutters, "Oh great, who invited Aberdolf Linkler?" As if this is a minor party foul, instead of a crime against nature showing up uninvited. Rick explains to Summer, "Linkler is a crazed maniac, just a misguided effort of mine to create a morally neutral superleader by combining the DNA of Adolf Hitler and Abraham Lincoln. He admits it, just adds up to a lame, weird loser." That's Rick's scientific assessment. Not ethically catastrophic, or maybe I shouldn't have Frankensteined history's most polarizing figures. Just lame. Linkler walks up to Rick, clearly having a rough millennium. "Rick, you brought me into this world, a suffering abomination tortured by the duality of its being. Every moment of his existence is agony because half his brain wants to free people and the other half wants to exterminate them. He's literally hardwired for moral whiplash, like if you programmed a Roomba to simultaneously clean and dirty your floors. But I shall finally know peace when I watch the life drain from your wretched body. Linkler's here for revenge, which honestly tracks. If someone created you as a genetic punchline that resulted in constant psychological torture, you'd probably want them dead too." But then Linkler accidentally bumps Brad, one of Summer's cool friends. Brad gets aggressive. Linkler tries to de-escalate. "I have no quarrel with you, boy." Brad takes offense at being called boy. Then Brad asks if Linkler thinks the Third Reich will reign for 1,000 years, which is a wild accusation to throw at someone who's literally half Hitler. Like, yes, technically part of him probably does think that. The other part wants to emancipate everyone. It's complicated. Rick starts chanting, "Kick his ass, Brad." Everyone joins in. They all watch Brad beat up Linkler like it's Fight Club, high school edition. Jessica begs Brad to stop. Nobody listens. The genetic abomination gets jumped by a teenager at a house party, which is somehow both the most and least dignified way this could have gone. Later, Rick sends Morty, Linkler, and Nancy on a mission to collect Calaxian crystals from an alien dimension. A two-headed creature attacks them. Linkler fights it off, yelling, "Prepare to be emancipated from your own inferior genes," which is maybe the most confused battle cry ever uttered. Is he liberating the creature or calling it genetically inferior? Both? Neither? Someone check his internal monologue. It's gotta be exhausting in there. Linkler kills the creature but gets mortally wounded. He's dying against a rock, bleeding out, doing the whole tragic death scene. He tells Morty he's sorry, that he loves Rick like a father, that he only wanted Rick's acceptance. It's very Darth Vader, minus the redemption arc. Morty runs back to tell Rick, genuinely emotional. Rick's response? He cuts up the crystals with his credit card and snorts them like it's Studio 54. Well, at least he didn't die in vain. He got these crystals, and these babies just saved this lame party. The crystals weren't for getting home or fixing anything. They were just alien drugs Rick wanted to get high on. Linkler died, thinking his sacrifice meant something. Rick just used his death as an excuse to score party drugs and do a dance called the Rick Dance, while everyone copies him. It's like if someone died getting you concert tickets, and you were like, "Sweet, free Nickelback show." The post-credits scene shows Linkler's not actually dead. He wakes up on that rock, muttering, "Revenge." But before he can do anything, an alien grabs him and stuffs him into its genital hole. Then another alien takes him, and they start passing him back and forth while a shirtless guy yells, "Party." Linkler's screaming, "Please, stop," while getting repeatedly violated by alien genitals. The show really said, "You thought his life was bad? Watch this." That's how the season ends for Linkler. Created in agony, beaten up at a party, left to die on a rock, wakes up to get sexually assaulted by aliens. If there's a support group for Rick's failed experiments, Linkler's got stories. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick combined two of the most polarizing figures in human history and acted surprised when the result was unstable. That's not how genetics or morality works. You don't create ethical balance by combining a liberator and a dictator. You create someone torn between liberation and dictatorship. Linkler explicitly says he's a suffering abomination tortured by the duality of its being. This isn't theoretical suffering, he's in constant agony because his DNA is programmed for contradictory moral imperatives. It's like installing both iOS and Android on the same phone and being shocked when it catches fire. And Rick's response to creating sentient suffering? Avoid him at parties and hope he goes away. Rick didn't try to fix him, didn't even apologize. He just called him lame and let Brad beat him up for entertainment. Very, "I brought you into this world. Now you're someone else's problem" energy. The fact that Linkler still seeks Rick's approval is the saddest part. He's dying, and his last thoughts are hoping his sacrifice will make Rick accept him. He loves Rick like a father, despite Rick abandoning him to deal with his impossible existence alone. And Rick doesn't care. Rick just wanted drugs. It's like if Pinocchio wanted to be a real boy, but Geppetto was just using him for firewood. The episode treats Linkler like a joke, the weird experiment that crashes parties and gets beat up by teenagers. But strip away the humor, and it's a horror story about creating conscious beings for experimentation, abandoning them when they don't work out, and using their deaths for personal benefit. Very Doctor. Moreau meets BoJack Horseman meets every mad scientist learns nothing trope simultaneously. Rick made a person whose existence is torture, called him lame, let him get jumped, sent him on a suicide mission, used his death to score drugs, and never thought twice about it. The show frames this as Rick being Rick, but it's basically playing God with a lab coat and a drinking problem, then ghosting your creation when it needs therapy. If your jaw dropped there, the next moment will leave it on the floor. Rick took Morty to harvest death crystals that show how you'll die based on your choices, then was shocked when Morty stole one and became obsessed with dying old with Jessica. Morty's crystal-guided decisions led him to crash their ship, impaling Rick on a sharp rock and killing him. It's basically Final Destination meets that magic 8-ball you had as a kid, except instead of ask again later, it's drive the spaceship into the ground or you won't get the girl. In Edge of Tommardy, Rick Die Rickpeat, the Season 4 premiere. For those keeping score, the family's at breakfast, doing this whole new, respectful communication thing. Beth's been making Rick ask permission before dragging Morty into interdimensional chaos. Rick's so annoyed he literally installed an auto-response chip in his brain. Very, I bought a robot to text my ex back for me, energy. Rick finally asks Morty properly to go to Forbodulon Prime for death crystals. They take off, and Rick's driving like he just got cut off in a Costco parking lot, aggressively swerving through asteroids because he's big mad about having to use his manners. Rick explains what death crystals do. They show you how you're gonna die based on your current trajectory. He demonstrates during a firefight with crystal poachers, certain death, uncertain death, basically turning precognition into a combat cheat code. It's like if Neo from The Matrix used his powers exclusively to win bar fights and steal people's wallets. Morty accidentally looks into one. He sees himself as an old man dying peacefully with Jessica saying, "I love you, Morty." This becomes Morty's entire personality for the rest of the episode, which is honestly relatable. We've all had that one crush that made us make terrible decisions, just usually not accidentally become Akira. Terrible. Rick's philosophy: people that spend their life avoiding death are already dead. Cool, quote, very fortune cookie, zero follow-through on keeping the death-showing crystals away from his anxiety-riddled teenage grandson. Morty asks to drive. Rick's suspicious but agrees, first mistake in a long line of mistakes. Morty immediately starts driving toward Earth instead of space, because the crystal's showing him he needs to go home. Rick tells him to go up. Morty refuses. "You're gonna make me die wrong." Rick realizes Morty has a death crystal. "You little monster. I thought you were masturbating." Morty: "And you took that in stride?" This exchange reveals so much about this family's dysfunction that we probably need a therapist just to unpack it, but we're not doing that today. They fight over the wheel. The ship crashes. A huge crystalline spike impales Rick through the chest like he's in a Mortal Kombat fatality. Rick dies, his last words being, "I love you, Morty." Very touching. Would have been more touching if it wasn't caused by Rick leaving magical death prediction rocks within grabbing distance of a teenager. Then, a hologram of Rick appears. Turns out, Rick put a crisis detection chip in Morty's spine. Very Black Mirror. Very, I planned for my own recklessness. Holo Rick instructs Morty to grab Rick's DNA and clone him back. But here's where it gets weird. And by weird, I mean the show's about to speedrun through multiple fascist dimensions for comedic effect. Rick's clone vat was taken offline, so his backup reroutes to a fascist Rick's universe. Rick wakes up naked in another Rick's house. This Rick and Morty are actual Nazis, who shoot the socialist clone Rick. The show really said, season 4 premiere, let's do Schindler's List, but make it a bit. Meanwhile, Morty's still following the crystal at school. The crystal gives him superhuman confidence because he knows he can't die unless it leads to his Jessica death future. When a bully attacks, Morty touches him, and the bully disintegrates, like he lost a game of Thanos roulette. Morty becomes Akira, full Tetsuo body horror situation, happening behind the mall. He kills dozens of people just by touching them. He goes to court, gives a nonsensical testimony that happens to sound like the judge's dead husband's last words, and gets acquitted. The crystal's guiding him through butterfly effect choices that lead to impossible outcomes, which is both the coolest and stupidest way to use precognition. Jessica invites him skinny dipping. Morty declines because apparently they hook up in their 40s, not now. He's so committed to this one specific death scenario that he's turning down teenage fantasies. That's dedication, or mental illness, or both, the show's not really clarifying. Rick keeps dying and bouncing through clone bodies. He ends up in a wasp universe where everyone's a wasp except him. The wasp family is actually nice, they're empathetic, helpful. Basically, if Canadians were insects with stingers. Rick almost settles in, until Morty breaks in, and accidentally gets the wasp family killed. Nothing says season 4 energy like repeatedly murdering friendly wasp families. Rick finally makes it home. Holo Rick has gained sentience by absorbing ferrofluid, becoming physical, and immediately goes on a power trip, trying to kill everyone. Even Rick's safety measures develop god complexes. It's like if your fire extinguisher caught fire, and then tried to burn down your house. They stop Holo Rick. Morty admits he got carried away with the crystal addiction. They return home where Jerry's furious about his son turning into Akira. The episode ends with meta-commentary about season 4's direction. Rick and Morty will do a little of this, a little of that, sometimes classic stuff, sometimes not. Very self-aware, very, we know you're watching this and judging our creative choices. Summer makes a crude joke that ruins the season premiere mood, and they kick her out. The show literally has a character ruin the season 4 premiere within the season 4 premiere. That's either brilliant meta-comedy or the writers having a breakdown in real time. I genuinely can't tell. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick knew exactly how dangerous death crystals are. He explicitly says people who use them are about to get the heat. Then he brings them within arm's reach of Morty, who has the impulse control of a golden retriever at a tennis ball factory. The crystal shows one possible future death without context. Morty sees himself dying old with Jessica and assumes that's goals. He doesn't consider that dying with Jessica might mean murder-suicide or nursing home fire, or any number of scenarios where technically yes, they're together, but also everything's terrible. He just sees the endpoint like it's a LinkedIn achievement and commits to every insane choice that leads there. Rick's death was entirely preventable. If he'd secured the crystals or grabbed them from Morty immediately, he'd be fine. Instead, he argued about driving privileges while Morty was literally screaming about dying wrong. It's like watching someone ignore every red flag because they're colorblind and also stubborn. The clone backup system reveals Rick's been planning for disasters. He's got holograms and spines and clone vats across dimensions. But he disabled his own clone vat a couple seasons ago for reasons the show doesn't explain, so when he dies, his consciousness bounces through random realities like the world's worst game of interdimensional hot potato. Morty's crystal addiction causes more damage than any villain that season. He kills dozens of people, creates an Akira-level threat, forces Rick through multiple deaths across fascist dimensions, all because he wanted to ensure he'd eventually die with his high school crush. The crystal didn't make him evil, it just made him completely fine with murder, if it leads to his preferred death decades from now. The whole disaster starts because Rick was annoyed about asking permission for adventures. His pettiness about family boundaries literally got him killed through a chain reaction he should have predicted. For the smartest man in the universe, Rick's really bad at basic risk assessment when his ego's involved. The show frames this as a wacky season premiere about balancing spontaneity with planning. But strip away the meta-commentary and fascist dimension gags, and it's about Rick handing Morty a device that makes him okay with mass murder, then being shocked when Morty immediately uses it irresponsibly. The takeaway is supposedly split the diff, but the actual lesson is maybe don't give teenagers magical artifacts that show them their deaths and make them fine with becoming serial killers to achieve them. Rick learned this by dying repeatedly. Very on brand for the show, learn nothing until the consequences are catastrophic and also hilarious. And trust me, it only goes downhill from here next. Rick's dumb moment. After reluctantly giving Morty a dragon, Rick got trapped in a soul-bonding ritual with the dragon that turned out to be intensely sexual. The dragon world revealed that soul bonding is essentially a magical orgy, and Rick became trapped in this fantasy realm where his technology didn't work. It's basically if someone who exclusively believes in science accidentally got married in a magical ceremony and then found out divorce requires participating in a 10-person ritual. Very I didn't read the iTunes terms and conditions energy, except the consequences are mystical polyamory. In Claw and Hoarder, Special Rick Tim's Morty, Rick promises Morty a dragon as payment for helping him fight robots. Morty's been asking for one. Rick's been deflecting with offers of rocket shoes and Wolverine claws, very "your mom said we have dragons at home" vibes. When Rick's ship crashes and Beth finds out about the promise, Rick has to follow through. They go to the Dragon Realm, where a wizard performs a soul-binding ceremony between Morty and a dragon named Balthramah. Rick's making sarcastic comments, "Oh my god, it's my first gay wedding," because he fundamentally doesn't respect magic. The show's really doing a speedrun of establishing that Rick thinks magic is for nerds who won't admit they're Christian. Balthramah immediately announces he wants to enter my lair and sleep upon my hoard until the age of man expires. Not exactly the fun adventure companion Morty was hoping for. Very, I matched with someone on Tinder, and they only want to talk about their cryptocurrency portfolio, energy. Rick discovers why when he goes to confront Balthramah. The dragon's lair is full of rare collectibles, original ecto-cooler juice boxes from 1989, small soldiers, spin pops, Future's self-titled album signed in Molly and Percocet. Rick's immediately hooked, like he just walked into a Comic-Con vendor booth with unlimited funds. They start bonding over the hoard and doing volcanic fumes together, which is either dragon drugs or the show's really committed to the getting high in your buddy's basement metaphor. Then it happens. The show doesn't show it directly, but heavily implies Rick and Balthramah engage in soul bonding with all the visual language of a Cinemax late-night special. Morty walks in on them and freaks out. They're both clearly in the middle of something intimate, and neither wants to stop. It's giving walked in on your roommate, except your roommate is your grandpa, and the other party is a mythical creature. The The dragon wizard shows up furious, calling Balthramah a slut dragon repeatedly, like genuinely just yelling slut over and over while whipping him. The show really committed to this bit. Every time the wizard whips Balthramah, Rick feels it too because they're soul bonded. Rick screaming, "Why does it feel like you're whipping me?" which is a question he should have asked before engaging in magical rituals. Rick tries to use his technology to fight back, but discovers none of it works in the dragon realm. The wizard has true power, which looks like magic. He summons a stone monster. Rick's like, "I thought the rock monster was here to introduce a physicist," because even while losing, Rick can't stop being a smartass. The wizard teleports him to a mountaintop and leaves him to die. Morty has to use magic from the dragon spellbook to rescue Rick, the thing Rick mocked at the beginning. The thing you made fun of in Act 1 saves you in Act 3 story structure. They discover Balthramah has been sentenced to hang by the neck until dead for violating the treaty by soul bonding with multiple riders. Turns out it takes 78 years to hang a dragon to death, so Rick's just gonna be choking for decades unless they stop this. Rick describes it like swallowing a really big vitamin with no water, which is somehow both accurate and deeply annoying as a comparison. Rick gives Morty and Summer magical powers to rescue Balthramah. Summer becomes a sexy arrow-shooty lady who treats magic like it requires zero skill, just vibes and manifestation energy. She's shooting arrows without looking, asking Rick to make it look like they're coming out of her butthole. The show really said, Season 4, let's get weird with it. They meet the slut dragons, dragons who live in caves and engage in various sexual acts. One dragon's into woolly mammoths, another's into scat play. They're having arguments about their kinks like it's a Reddit thread. The show's really leaning into this premise hard enough to possibly injure itself. The slut dragons explain that to defeat the wizard and break Rick's soul bond, they need to perform a 10-slut soul orgy and become the all-slut phoenix dragon. Morty's frantically reading the spellbook, looking for another way there's gotta be. Another ending in the strategy guide energy. There isn't one. They all participate in the orgy. Rick, Morty, Summer, Balthramah, and 6 other dragons. The show implies this through visual metaphor involving a phoenix rising, and definitely not showing the actual logistics, because this is still cable television. They successfully defeat the wizard and break the soul bond. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick's entire brand is that science trumps everything. He constantly mocks magic, religion, anything that can't be explained through rational means. Then he gets so distracted by rare collectibles and dragon drugs that he accidentally enters a binding magical contract in a realm where his science literally doesn't work. It's like if Neil deGrasse Tyson accidentally joined a coven and couldn't science his way out of a hex. Rick didn't read the terms and conditions. The soul bonding ceremony established the rules up front, but Rick assumed magic was either fake or that his technology could override it. He was wrong on both counts. In the dragon realm, magic is the operating system, and Rick's tech is incompatible software trying to run Doom on a toaster. The sexual nature of soul bonding wasn't disclosed up front, which is definitely an informed consent issue the show doesn't really address. Rick thought he was hanging out with a dragon who had cool stuff, and it turned into a magical sexual encounter that trapped his soul. That's basically the plot of every I accidentally married someone in Vegas movie, except with more fantasy elements and fewer Elvis impersonators. Rick's forced to participate in a 10-person magical orgy with his grandchildren present. That's the only solution the show provides, which is either brilliant satire about the kinds of situations Rick's hubris gets him into, or the writers had fun pitching increasingly uncomfortable scenarios in the room, possibly both. The wizard defeating Rick so easily is humiliating for someone who considers himself the smartest being in the universe. The wizard doesn't outsmart Rick, he just uses magic, which Rick has no defense against. It's like watching someone who only knows karate try to win a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. Wrong skill set entirely. The episode reveals Rick's lonely enough that bonding with a dragon over a horde felt meaningful. He was genuinely having fun with Balthramah, which is rare for Rick. That vulnerability got exploited by a system he didn't understand, leaving him trapped and humiliated. This is why we don't open our hearts to people, messaging, but with dragons. Morty has to save Rick using the dragon magic book, the thing Rick mocked. Rick spends the episode being rescued by magic he doesn't believe in, wielded by his grandson he considers less intelligent. Every part of Rick's self-image takes a hit like it's a piñata at a birthday party. The show treats the orgy as a punchline. Rick and Morty are traumatized afterward, but it's played for laughs. Summer's asking not to tell their parents, which tracks. Morty wants to shower and feels dirty, which is the most emotionally intelligent response anyone has. The episode ends with Balthramah still trying to get Rick to soul bone one more time before leaving, which is honestly just sad at that point. Rick learns nothing, as usual. The only lasting consequence is that he now knows magic is real and can override his technology in certain realms. That's valuable intel, wrapped in the worst possible learning experience, like learning fire is hot by setting yourself on fire, then insisting it was worth it for the data. The episode's basically a cautionary tale about engaging with systems you don't understand, disguised as a dragon adventure that becomes a magical sex comedy. Rick's assumption that intelligence equals universal understanding got him soul bonded to a dragon and forced into a 10-person magical orgy to escape. That's what happens when someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else skips the tutorial level and wonders why they're stuck in a boss fight they can't win. If that made no sense, the next Rick's dumb moment will confuse you even more. Rick kept a massive secret archive of memories he erased from Morty's mind, including memories where Rick did something embarrassing, like saying taken for granted instead of taken for granted. Rick abused memory wiping technology out of pure vanity, denying Morty the ability to learn from mistakes while hiding his own flaws. It's basically if your therapist deleted your memories every time you witnessed them being wrong about something, except your therapist also takes you on life-threatening adventures and has a drinking problem. In Morty's Mind Blowers, Morty's traumatized after looking into the eyes of a truth tortoise that downloaded universal knowledge into his brain. He can't function. Rick casually suggests erasing the memory, and when Morty's suspicious about how quickly Rick offered that solution, Rick reveals his secret underground lab. They descend into a massive circular archive room filled with thousands of colored vials, red, blue, and purple. Rick calls them Morty's Mind Blowers and breaks the fourth wall to announce they're doing this instead of interdimensional cable. Very meta, very we know you know this is a clip show. Morty's shocked. How long have I been asking you to remove memories? Rick explains this isn't even the first time they've had this exact conversation. There's no dust on the vials because they've been through this archive before and had those memories erased too. It's memory wiping all the way down. Rick starts showing Morty various memories. One involves Morty seeing a man on the moon through his telescope, becoming obsessed with proving moon people exist, and accidentally causing a guidance counselor named Mr. Lunas to kill himself because everyone thought he was a pedophile instead of literally from the moon. Brutal, genuinely traumatic, makes sense to erase. Another memory shows Morty and Rick soul bonding with aliens, who achieve an eternal orgasmic afterlife if killed by great warriors. Morty accidentally makes one of them lose faith in their religion, condemning him to hell, also pretty traumatic. But then Rick shows one that reveals his true motivation. They're fighting in an alien uprising. Rick says, "We should never take things for granted." Morty corrects him. "It's granted, with a D. Take things for granted." Rick's been saying it wrong presumably for decades. Morty's delighted. "Jesus Christ, Rick, what are you? A boulder, a rock person? How long have you been saying that wrong?" He's genuinely amused by catching Rick making such a basic mistake. Rick asks if Morty wants it erased. Morty says yes, probably thinking Rick means erasing the danger they're in. Rick erases Morty's memory of discovering Rick's malapropism because Rick was embarrassed. Morty was happy in that moment. He was bonding with Rick over a harmless mistake. Rick deleted it purely out of ego. Morty realizes what the color coding means. Blue vials are memories Morty requested removed. Purple are the family's fault. Red are Rick's fault. Morty asks about the red ones. Rick deflects, claiming he doesn't use color to sort things, because I'm not a mouse in a European children's book. But Morty notices all the pink vials are stored by the liquor cabinet. Rick's been drinking and erasing memories impulsively. One memory shows Rick asking Morty to flip a light switch. Morty flips the wrong one first, then corrects himself. Rick heard 3 distinct clicks and deduced Morty's mistake. Rick makes Morty dig up graves as punishment for flipping the wrong switch. It's wildly disproportionate. The memory gets erased probably because Rick realized later he overreacted and didn't want Morty remembering his cruelty. Another memory reveals Rick gave Morty the ability to understand animals. Morty overhears squirrels discussing global politics and conspiracies. The squirrels realize Morty can understand them and call in reinforcements. Rick freaks out. "You fucked with squirrels, Morty. We have to pack up and move to a new reality." They abandon their entire reality because Morty learned squirrels run the world. Rick erases the memory so Morty doesn't know they're refugees from a squirrel-controlled dimension. That's hiding Rick's failure to warn him about squirrels before giving him animal understanding powers. The episode reveals Rick's been erasing memories so frequently that he has backup protocols. When Rick and Morty erase too many memories and forget who they are, Summer has to come down and fix them. It's happened multiple times. There's a Scenario 4 contingency plan. Morty eventually realizes the scope of the manipulation. How many of these are just horrible mistakes I've made? Maybe I'd stop making so many if I let myself learn from them. Rick dismisses this. Don't break your back, creating a lesson, Morty. It's a free-form anthology. Rick's admitting he doesn't care if Morty learns anything. The archive exists for Rick's convenience, not Morty's well-being. Memories get erased when they're inconvenient, embarrassing, or challenge Rick's authority, not based on what's best for Morty's development. Here's what makes this monumentally stupid. Rick built a system that prevents Morty from growing as a person while simultaneously hiding Rick's own mistakes. That's control disguised as care. The taken-for-granted memory is the smoking gun. Morty was happy. He was laughing, bonding with Rick over a harmless mistake. That memory had no trauma, no lasting damage, no reason to be erased except Rick's fragile ego couldn't handle being wrong about a common phrase. Rick's deleted memories of Morty's genuine joy because those moments revealed Rick's imperfections. That's depriving Morty of positive memories with his grandfather because Rick's vanity matters more than Morty's happiness. The memory archive prevents Morty from pattern recognition. If Rick erases every time he does something terrible, Morty can't learn to protect himself from Rick's behavior. It's gaslighting with extra steps, literally erasing evidence of Rick's actions so Morty can't hold him accountable. Rick's also erasing memories of his own mistakes, which means Rick isn't learning either. He's removing his own incentive to improve. When you can delete consequences, why change your behavior? It's the ultimate avoidance mechanism for someone who claims to be rational. The color coding system reveals Rick knows exactly what he's doing. He's categorized who's at fault for each memory removal. He's aware he's been erasing things for selfish reasons. This isn't accidental, it's systematic manipulation with record keeping. Morty's request to remember everything leads to chaos. They both try to kill themselves because the weight of all those memories is overwhelming. But that's proof Rick's been exposing Morty to so much trauma that remembering it all at once is psychologically devastating. The episode ends with them erasing the memory of going through the archive. Again, they're trapped in a cycle where they discover Rick's manipulation, get overwhelmed, erase it, and repeat. Summer's used to fixing this. It's routine for her. The family's accepted that Rick and Morty periodically have breakdowns requiring memory wipes. Rick's created a system where Morty can never fully trust his own memories. Any gap could be something Rick deleted. Any inconsistency might be evidence of tampering. That's creating permanent uncertainty about one's own history. The technology itself isn't the problem, it's how Rick uses it. Memory removal could be genuinely therapeutic for actual trauma. But Rick applies it to everything from traumatic incidents to moments where Morty was simply happy while Rick was embarrassed. That's abuse of a medical tool for personal convenience. Rick's excuse that it's a free-form anthology is transparently avoiding the real issue. It's not a fun compilation, it's evidence of manipulation. He's literally showing Morty proof that Rick alters his memories for selfish reasons and trying to frame it as entertainment. The worst part? This explains so much about Morty's character. His inconsistent confidence, his gaps in knowledge about past adventures, his inability to recognize patterns in Rick's behavior. It's all because Rick's been editing Morty's experiences like a TV show in post-production. Rick's gambling that Morty will never keep his memories of the archive long enough to act on it. And he's right, the episode ends with them both forgetting again. The manipulation continues because the evidence of manipulation gets erased. It's the perfect crime, except the victim is your grandson, and the crime is psychological abuse. The show frames this as dark comedy, but strip away the jokes, and it's a horror story about someone systematically erasing a child's ability to understand their own life. Rick's not protecting Morty from trauma, he's protecting himself from accountability, while ensuring Morty never develops enough awareness to leave. That's the end of today's video. If you want more videos like these, subscribe to our channel.